All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started here pretty soon. So if you want to go ahead and take your seat. Wow, that was quick. All right. You ready? All right. Good morning, everyone. How are you? I got here like 2 minutes ago, so everyone can calm down. I've made it. Good morning and welcome to the State of the County. My name is Rebecca Heid, and I'm the Director of Government Advocacy for the Central Florida Division of Advent Health. I'm a member of the Polk Vision Operating Board, and I serve as chair as the Polk Vision Government Advisory Team. Jeez, that's a mouthful. I want to welcome you all here today. Thank you for carving out some time to join us both in person and virtually today. A special thanks to the Polk Vision Board of Directors for their leadership, and to our event sponsors, Advent Health, Citizens Bank and Trust, and TECO. Now, I know that there are a number of elected officials here that have joined us, so if you will please rise and allow us to express our gratitude for your leadership and service to the community. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate it. Please remember to mute your phones, but keep them on and handy because you will want to text your questions for our presenters to the number on the screen, which is 863-888-2911. We will do our best to ensure those questions are answered before we conclude. Now, this event is one of series produced by Polk Vision, designed to inform and engage the community. These events include annually the State of the County and Mayor's Roundtable, in addition to a variety of topical workshops. And now, if you will all please rise as Sheriff Grady Judd leads us in an invocation followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, I want to thank Polk Vision. We're working on a mental health program with Gwinnell Brandt as our Director of Mental Health Services. But the vision came from Polk Vision, and I appreciate all the cities and all the community members that have joined us in this process as we work to keep our community more healthy in many different ways. Please join me in prayer. Dear Lord, we thank you for this day that you've given us. We thank you for your grace and your mercy and your blessings. We thank you for the men and women of Polk Vision and for the leaders and the people who work in government locally. We do things different here, dear Lord, and we know that we're leading the way that you would want us to lead. It is our job, dear Lord, to carry out what's right for the people of Polk County, all of the people of Polk County. Dear Lord, we ask your blessings upon this meeting and upon each and every one of us as we continue to work forward and to look forward and to vision for the future. We ask all of this in your name. Amen. Amen. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tamara Sakagawa. I'm the Vice President for Communications and Public Affairs here at Polk State College. So let me begin by saying welcome to the college. We're so happy you could be with us here today. Unfortunately, Dr. Falconetti was called away to another meeting, but when she and I were talking about Polk Vision being here today specifically for State of the County, we couldn't think of what a better facility to have you in. And the reason why is, for those of you who don't know, this facility was constructed in 2016, and it was only made possible by a very effective collaborative partnership between Polk County Board of County Commissioners, who donated the land, Sheriff Grady Judd, who was our fiercest advocate for this particular project, the Polk County Legislative Delegation, which secured the necessary funding, and of course the members of the community that supported this project. This facility was designed to consolidate first responder training in one technology-rich location. Here, Polk State instructors train individuals to serve on the front lines of our communities. They keep us safe, and they continue to make Polk one of the best places to live. So this facility and what we do within the walls best exemplifies what we can do together as a community and as a county. So it's great to have you all here today. Sorry, let me flip to my notes here. You're going to hear from some great speakers this morning regarding some updates of how our county will continue to grow and flourish. I would be remiss if I didn't recognize and thank the sheriff for his long-standing partnership with the college. Again, most recently with the new National Public Safety Innovation Academy, which is hosted here at CPS. Additionally, I'd like to thank all of the elected officials in the audience. Your leadership and service to us is greatly appreciated. And of course, I would be remiss if I did not thank Commissioner Martha Santiago, who I saw on her way in. Of course, she is our favorite commissioner because she also serves the college as our interim provost and head of academic affairs. So thank you all for being here this morning, and enjoy the event.
Thank you to Tamara and Dr. Falconetti for hosting this annual event. This is the second year that the state of county has been expanded to include updates from representatives including county government, public education, and public health. The program today will include a comprehensive report from each of today's speakers, including the Polk County Board of County Commissioners, with George Lindsey as the chair of the Board of County Commissioners, and our county manager, Bill Beasley. That update will be followed by Polk County Public Schools, Mrs. Sara Beth Wyatt, who's the chair of our school board, and Mr. Frederick Heid, who is our superintendent. And rounding out the presentations will be the Florida Department of Health in Polk County, Dr. Joy Jackson, who is the director. At the conclusion of the presentations, again, we'll be holding a question and answer session. Please mute your phones, but keep them on so you're ready for those hard-hitting questions that I get to read out. And that number to text is 863-888-2911. It is now my honor to welcome to the stage Mr. George Lindsey, chair of the Polk County Board of County Commissioners, and together with Bill Beasley. Oh, there you go.
Good morning, folks. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Look, on behalf of the Board of County Commissioners, it's again a pleasure to make these presentations. What I want to share with you today, hopefully, will reflect, I think, the county's in a strong financial condition. I think the county is substantially growing, and I think much of what we share with you today is kind of a reflection of how we're trying to move the needle and to address what hopefully your takeaway will be substantial growth. That theme is all about growth. If you've been here in prior years, the theme has been about growth. If you're here today, it's going to continue to be about growth for the foreseeable future, because that's where we're at. Some of the things we're going to talk about again, growth is it. Some of the economic climate that I think we find ourselves in Polk County, I think there's some real positive things, some positive reflections going on in Polk County. I'd like to think we're going to also talk about some challenges that are ahead of us and some of the actions that are being put in place to deal with some of those challenges. And in the end, I think we're going to talk a little bit about some of the major infrastructure elements that Polk County is planning to address. Commissioner Lindsey and I are going to tag team a little bit of this. I'll take most of the lead on some of the original material. Commissioner Lindsey will follow with a lot of information related to some of the infrastructure issues and some of those challenges. Let's talk about, I've got a couple of slides that are going to share a lot of numbers, and the numbers really drive the impact of where we are today. A couple of quick things. Number one, we are the fastest, Polk County, Florida, is the fastest growing county in the state of Florida. It has been for the last 2.5 years, at least according to our data. And what's happening now is Polk is now being reflected on the national level. We're also, based on 2020 to 2022 data, we are the 5th fastest growing county in the country. That's a substantial, and 2 years ago, we were the 7th fastest growing county in the country. So we're moving up with, and I'll share some data with that. The other thing that it may not sound like a lot, and I'll put it in some context for you, is that in 1 year, from 2021 to 2022, our population grew by 4.2%. That doesn't sound like a lot, but when I put it in some context in terms of how long it's taken us to get to this point, and every year we're seeing that kind of growth, what does that say for the trend of future growth in Polk County? Some more numbers. Look at a couple of things. In 2010, our census was 602,000 people. 10 years later, 725,000 people. It took 10 years, and we grew about 20%. I mentioned to you, in 1 year, from 2021 to 2022, we grew 4.5%. In 1 year, we grew 4.5% in population growth. It took us 10 years to grow 20%. If that trend continues, we'll talk a little bit more about when are we going to break 1 million people in Polk County. Our current population projections based on census data as of July 2022, and we're approaching almost a year from that. This is July 2022, 787,000 people. A couple of things that I tell people when I make some speaking tours is that Polk County, Florida is the 4th largest geographically sized county in the state of Florida. We're about the 7th or 8th largest county in the country east of the Mississippi River. When you look at the size of Polk County, we're substantially larger than the state of Rhode Island, slightly larger than the state of Delaware, and because of these new population data, based on 787,000 people, Polk County, Florida is now larger than, population-wise, than a number of states. The data would suggest Wyoming, we're larger than Wyoming, Vermont, Alaska, North Dakota. So Polk is growing, and is that a heaven or a hell kind of a scenario we're having to deal with? This is some data, again, more numbers. This is the top 10 growing counties in the nation. If you look, Texas has about 4 or 5 of them. Florida now has 3 of them. You've got one from Arizona. But the moral of this story is that 2 years ago, we were the 7th fastest growing county in the country. Today, we're shown as the 5th fastest growing county in the country. We're rivaling states across the country: Nevada, Colorado, Utah, Oregon, Texas, California, Polk County, Florida. And if you look, Lee County, Florida is now showing up. You look, Hillsborough County, Florida is starting to show up in the top fastest growing counties in the country. What's significant here, I mentioned before, here, this 32,000 increase from the 755 in July of 2021 to the 787 in July of 2022. That's the 4.5% I mentioned to you. In 1 year, we've grown by 5%, as opposed to the 10 years it took us to grow 20%. If that population growth trend continues, the question is going to be, where are we going to be, say, in the 2030 census? And I'll share a little bit about when I think we're going to break 1 million people. Bieber is I think the Bureau of Economic and Business Research at the University of Florida. They produce a number of different scenarios for population projections. These are different models that they project for us. It's specific to Polk County. And they make different assumptions. There's different information included in the various models. But the point that I want to leave with you here is 2022 is right in here. If in 2022 we were at 787,000 people, close to 800,000 people, if this curve is accurate, this would suggest that by 2050 we're at 1,322,000 people. If this curve is accurate and those projections are reflected at how we're currently growing, you got to ask yourself, when are we going to break 1 million people in Polk County? And look, I don't know what's so significant about 1 million people. In some jurisdictions, it means nothing. But in Polk County, that has been the holy grail of discussions. When we break 1 million people, my answer is, so what? It's 1 million people. We got to deal with it. But 1 million people in Polk County, There was, 5 years ago, we thought that that million number wouldn't show up until 2040. I believe you're talking about 2031, 2032. What does it mean? It means more people, more demands for services. We're becoming a very urbanized county. People want urban levels of service. They don't particularly like that rural level of service or that rural lifestyle philosophy in terms of them moving in here. They want more amenities. Is that going to be a burden or or a curse for local government to have to change its paradigm about how we deal with local government services? These are some additional population projections. This is done with a transportation planning organization. It's all relative, but the point here is that where is the population growth going to occur in Polk County? If the numbers are increasing, and they are, where are they likely to land? This data would suggest that you're going to see smaller growth in the southern sections of the county, smaller being about 60,000 in that 2050 time frame. There's going to be growth in the south areas, but not as significant as the northeast and the northwest. You look at those numbers, Commissioner Lindsey, you can chime in a little bit here if you don't mind. We always use Lakeland as the model about 120,000 people plus or minus, the size of that city being picked up and put someplace else in Polk County. You're talking about 220,000 additional people showing up in the northeast, over and above what exists today out there. If you drive through the northeast section of Polk County, you know how much of a headache that can be. But we're talking about adding another 220,000 people on top of that. Same thing in the northwest sector of the county. We're talking about adding 169,000 people on top of what's already there. You're looking at cities that are twice the size of the city of Lakeland showing up in an area that on top of what's existing today. Similar, if the people are going to show up in those sections, in those types of quantities or percentages of growth, what about the employment forecast? The same thing applies, and the distribution looks similar. It makes sense that our employment base will grow in the south the least, and in the northeast the most, in the northwest the second most. So that's where all the jobs are going to be created and are likely to exist in the next 10, 15, 20 years. Some economic development data that I'll share with you. Our current year budget, $2.4 billion. Part of that was based on ad valorem, the value of your property going up by about 17.75%. Marcia, the property appraisers here, and that's significant. I don't think we've seen anything like that in the last 20 years. But the idea that property values were growing at that kind of rate certainly kind of puts us on our heels about where do we go from there. I think you're going to see another year of significant ad valorem property value growth. I think you won't see 17.75. You might see 15. You might see 16%. But you're going to see another really good year of ad valorem value growth. The question becomes, where do we go from there? Is it going to level out? Is it going to decline to some extent? It's still going to increase, but is it going to increase it to 9% maybe, or 8%, or 11%? Is that the indication of possibly recession showing up in Polk County? We'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. The employment growth across all non-farm industries. Really what that says is that anything other than ag is showing substantial increases in the employment growth in those industries. I'll talk a little bit about diversity going on in Polk County relative to our business industries, but the idea that everything but ag is growing by double digits in terms of the employment growth associated with those industries. And there's a recent publication, I say recent, within the last year, 18 months, that Polk County, Florida, nationally was the best county for talent attraction. And really, when you flip that, what that tells me is that Polk has positioned itself. If we're the 10th best county for talent attraction, we're doing something in Polk County that's attracting that talent. We are positioning ourselves to offer those types of quality jobs, to attract those types of quality candidates who want to be in Polk County. Nationally, we were ranked the 10th best county in the country to attract that talent. Something's going on in locally that is spinning that so that we are indeed attracting that talent. That's an awfully positive sign for us. Some more economic development incentives. What I want to call your attention to is this pie chart. I'm not going to go through all of that, but what I will tell you is, and there's a lot of different industries that are reflected in those percentages of growth, but look at the distribution of that pie chart. It's not heavily weighted one side or the other. We don't have all of our eggs in one basket. There's a nice distribution across all of those growth industries, and that is, again, while I think you're going to find that Polk County is one of the best, most diverse industry across the public, across all sectors of employment here. We're not heavily weighted one way or the other. That's why I think we did fairly well through the COVID and the post-COVID reactions, that Polk's economy was well diverse across these spectrums, and we've done really, really well recovering and now advancing. A couple of other business statistics. If you look at some of the job creations and the investments that have occurred just between calendar year 21 and 22, we've put 559,000 additional square feet into industry, into local businesses. There's been a $268 million investment in capital in those businesses. We've created just under 900 new high-paying, decent-paying jobs in Polk County. A couple of other things you've heard, and I'll mention these. Florida is clearly the best state for businesses. Nationally, Florida is clearly the best state to conduct business in the country. When you pair that back, Polk County being the fastest growing county in the state and the 5th fastest growing county in the country, what Florida has done to help position folks who want to come to Florida and then they want to come to Polk County, it's unheard of. It's impressive. A couple of other things. Another economic driver in Polk County, and you all know this because you've been here a long time, is tourism and sports marketing. During the COVID years where people were cooped up inside, they want to be outside, they want active outside recreation, Polk County's tourism and sports marketing, I think, has really hit the mark. You look at just 1 year ago, in 22, that year, we had over 300 events that were either sponsored by, coordinated with, we participated in, over 300 events where we brought people, teams, used different venues for different reasons, and that translated into over 5.5 million people coming to Polk County for those 300 plus venues or events that we helped sponsor. That translated into about 180 million in economic impact in Polk County. What's on the screen there are two of the newer venues. I think both are now up and running. They're both adjacent to the Lake Myrtle Sports Complex. One is the new soccer stadium there. If you've not been out to Lake Myrtle and seen that facility, you need to go see that. You can even see it from Berkeley Avenue. It's extremely, it really makes that campus, you know, that kind of marquee facility that we've always envisioned it to be. The other one is the water ski and water sports lake. That has had its first event. I know Mark Zimmerman is here. I think they've had their first event there recently. That's a nice venue, and it's all co-located on that Lake Myrtle Sports Complex. What a nice facility in partnership between our travel tourism, the city of Auburndale. It couldn't have been a nicer. Somebody who had that vision 15, 20 years ago really had their act together. Some more sports and sports marketing issues. That organization, even through the COVID era, the COVID journey was tough on everybody. We have had 24 consecutive months of record-breaking development tax revenue. That means there have been people, heads in beds, there have been people here on different venues, different events, different activities, but we're talking about 24 consecutive months of record-breaking revenues associated with our tourism and development program. What's in the pipeline on that side of the equation, I'm told 11 new hotels are being talked about in Polk County that will add about 1,000 additional beds or rooms into Polk County. 11 hotels showing up. I'm not sure where they're all going to go, but I certainly know where some need to go, but 11 new hotels. We have recently formed a partnership with the Florida High School Athletic Association to sponsor 7 state championships annually here in Polk County. And I know I talked to Gene Conrad after this past Sun and Fun event, and I couldn't imagine another event being more successful. But this was the 49th year. Next year is the 50th year. I can only imagine how successful that's going to be. But 50 years of Sun and Fun, after what I saw this past year, I can't imagine how many more people can show up to that event. That was extremely successful. And just a tidbit of information, that little last bullet would suggest that essentially when we've got visitors coming into Polk County and when they're paying parts of that tax associated with their stay here in Polk County, if they're not doing it and these venues have to be offered, then the locals are going to pay for it. So the idea there is the more events we can sponsor, the more people we can bring into the county, the more revenue they bring into the county. That really translates into the locals having less involvement in having to pay for those services and or capital investments. Let those who are participating in the venues do that. Let me talk a little bit about, is there a recession in our forecast? I'd mentioned earlier, I don't know that we can sustain the amounts of ad valorem tax growth that we're seeing in terms of the valuation of those properties. Some of this data would suggest that if you look here, this is comparing January of 2022 to January of 2023. If you look at residential home closings in that month, it says there was 976 homes that closed in the month of January 2022. A year later, it's only 716. There's about a 25-26% reduction in the sale of homes. The median sale of a home in 2022 was 310. That sale now is increased to 324, about a 5% increase in that value. This one's telling. The number of days a home stayed on the market in January of 2022 was 11 days. That same, a year later, that's now 37 days, a threefold increase in how long it's taking to move that house. The inventory, maybe Commissioner Lindsey can share, the inventory to me really says is that there was a lot more inventory, there was less inventory in January of 2022 than there is in January of 2023. I think that means there's just not much selling going on.
Well, there's certainly a flattening in the market. We've seen that a year ago. There would be a property would go on the market, and some of our realtor friends would know that you'd have 3 or 4 people bidding on the property and often paying in excess of the asking price. That's flipped a little bit, so now that was a seller's market. Now it's a little more of a buyer's market. The prices are mitigating down a little bit, staying on the market a little longer, and fewer bidders vying for that property, and properties are selling at or a little bit below the asking price. They're sitting on the market a little longer. The longer it sits, the more motivated the seller becomes to start making some concessions. So we're starting to see some cooling off of that, which is not a bad thing, but it's not going away. It's simply mitigating and slowing down a bit.
One of the metrics that we measure regularly, single-family residential building permits, that really is a metric that gauges what's happening in the community. We do this in partnership with all the municipalities. This is a graph essentially that shows building permits, single-family residential building permits. It includes some townhomes and some duplexes, but this really talks about the types of permitting activity that we have seen in the past year or so and that we're likely to see in the coming years. Does this suggest a recession? And the reason I say that is that if you look at that on the far left-hand side, that's Polk County, that's unincorporated Polk County. If you look at that, just over 5,000 that we issued. If you look down how sharply that has declined to the 22-23 current year and what our projected growth is in that, it's substantially lower than it has been in prior years. Is that an indication of a recession? And that theme, while there's some anomalies with some of the smaller towns, but there's some similarities between Davenport showing a higher year in 21-22 and then showing something leveling off in the out years. Same with Haines City, a leveling off. Their 21-22 number was a certain number, and then they started to show something less than that in the out years with a gradual growth. Same with Lakeland and similar events with Winter Haven. So I think the moral of that story is that building, construction, residential has slowed, we think, substantially. Commissioner Lindsey, yes?
That peak, the blue line there in Polk County, that may reflect a greater number of apartment, is that units or permits?
It's permits.
Permits. Well, there has been an acceleration in multifamily units in the last 12 to 18 months, which is a good thing, which addresses an affordable housing opportunity. But as I said earlier, things are cooling, but it's not going to evaporate, but it is cooling.
Another metric that we measure regularly is sales tax. If you'll look here, back in around the 2009-10 timeframe, that's where we bottomed out in terms of revenue on sales tax, and then there was a steady increase for the last 12 years. Until we get to 21-22. Now, 22-23, those were projections. And what I'll tell you is what we saw in October, November, December of this past year, the first quarter of this year, we saw something that was not alarming, but it clearly was lower expectations than we had about the sales tax revenues that we were taking in. So our projection would be is that lower take would continue through the rest of this fiscal year. But what we saw in January, February, and March was very different than what we saw in October, November, and December. The second quarter seemed to bounce higher than we anticipated. So the county's even acknowledging that our projection for sales tax is likely going to show a slight increase, not a decrease in the 22-23 year to end out. But I'm thinking we'll probably be somewhere around that 53 million in that year, and maybe we grow at 2 or 4% from that year. But we were anticipating an anomaly here by a slight drop this year in sales tax, but we're not seeing that. So I think that's a good news story, but it's not what we thought we were going to see based on October, November, December reports. Let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we're facing and some of the actions or some of the strategies that we're putting in place to address some of those challenges. Two themes that you're going to hear more and more about on an annual basis in Polk County is affordable housing and behavioral health. Those are two issues that are starting to come front and center. I'm not sure what manifested it to get it to this point, but what I'll tell you is that clearly we learned something from COVID. When it comes to behavioral health issues, affordable housing seems to be front and center, but there's a lot of different faces to affordable housing and strategies that the county has adopted for affordable housing. I want to talk a little bit about that. One of the things I don't think the county gets enough credit for is the millions of dollars that the county puts into affordable housing, multifamily developments. There are actually 5 developments that the county has got big skin in the game that draws down bigger skin. That first one, that Shag Grove Manor Apartments, this is in the Winter Haven, this is in cooperation with the Winter Haven Housing Authority. The county put in $2.3 million for a complex that is estimated to cost $27 million to have 84 units. The county's contribution secures 11 of those units as a commitment for affordable housing. They're all affordable housing units according to some federal guideline, because that's what incentivizes the developers to come to town to build these projects, to get these tax credits associated with affordable housing. The next one, Blue Sky Communities, this is Florence Place. This is over in the Florence Villa community in Winter Haven. I believe about a couple of months ago, they just broke ground on this facility. The county leveraged $2 million of county funds to draw down $27 million in project funds An 88-unit complex, 11 of those units being tied to the county's contribution. And that was with home money. Home money is federal money assigned to the county, and we have jurisdiction to use those funds in different ways. SHIP money is pure state funding. We've used that in several areas. Another one up in the next two, the Big Sky Community Swan Landing, you're showing that in two categories, and that's only because we use two different types of monies to make our contribution of $1 million. But collectively, our $1 million was leveraged to draw down $25 million, an 88-unit complex, of which 3 of those units are be tied directly to the county's use of funds. The Green Mills Holdings, the Autumn Village, that's an older complex. I say older. It's pre-COVID. It's over there off of Havendale Boulevard, but the county leveraged about $350-some thousand of local funds, SHIP funds, to draw down a $12.8 million investment to secure 10 units tied up to the county's use of our investment. There is one still pending. Those other ones are actually under construction or in operation today. There's still another one pending. The county has reserved $1 million for that investment. We don't know yet whether it's going to be in the Winter Haven area, the Haines City area, the Lakeland area. We're not sure exactly where this, New Jack is the contractor that we've selected to do this, but the county still has one more major project that's earmarked for affordable housing of the multifamily development type. So in total, you look at what the county has invested, just under $7 million to draw down over $100 million in investment in the multifamily projects. Affordable housing strategies that the county has. I've said to different groups, to the county, affordable housing has many different shapes to it. The county has a number of tools in their bag to deal with affordable housing. And this is just kind of an overview of those programs and some of the money that the county has allocated in those different categories. But when we talk about affordable housing, it's everything from helping you with rent, helping you with mortgage down payment, helping you to renovate your home, helping you to demolish and rebuild your home. It could be utility assistance. It could be a host of different things that we do, but collectively to us, that's affordable housing. We have a demolition and reconstruction program, and you see the kind of activity that we've occurred and the amount of investments that we've made in 1920, 2021, and 21-22. The new construction, that was a pilot program where we actually selected a contractor. We used sheeted parcels, identified those as available for new construction for affordable housing, and we then built that through a contract arrangement. We have owner-occupied that is less than $50,000 in renovations, and owner-occupied homes that are more than $50,000 and up to $100,000 in $110,000 in investments. We have down payment assistance programs. We have tenant-based rental assistance programs, and you can kind of see the metrics in terms of how we try to help folks on an annual basis with those allocations. And this is typically of an annual program. The one thing I'll call to your attention is the very last item, the SHIP Coronavirus Relief Fund. That was a special assignment during the COVID years where we received it from the state government, and that was intended to help with emergency rental assistance programs, maybe some utility assistance. But you can see that 620 and that 118, those are individuals who lived in apartment-type units that we assisted over those 2-year periods. In all, I think we are fairly well equipped with different tools in our bag to deal with affordable housing, but affordable housing to us is not necessarily workforce housing. It is not necessarily dealing with homelessness. It's really of housing that can be affordable for folks who meet certain guidelines based on the types of fund, whether they be federal or state monies that we deal with. But I think we do a pretty good program in terms of trying to address some basic elements of affordable housing in Polk County. Talk a little bit about behavioral health. The other facet I mentioned to you is you're going to hear more and more about behavioral health. Behavioral health, to me, is always related to substance abuse, mental health, developmental disabilities, all kinds of categories that relate to someone's behavioral health conditions or their mindset. I think the county has always had an element of behavioral health in our inventory in terms of how we budget, programs we offer, community relations that we have with the capacity in the community to offer these services. But I think you're going to start to see a ramping up of that in the county's annual budget. This is an indication that the county in 22-23 budget, we have allocated almost $19 million for behavioral health programs. I won't go through all of those programs, but what I'll tell you is that on one side, you'll see the indigent healthcare program is an active participant in those fund source for different programs. I'll tell you that some of our local funds do a heck of a job matching and drawing down what you see on the right-hand side of that screen, in that those federal grants, those state grants, a lot of that is available to us because we leverage that local money. I said, when I got here 17 years ago, one of the things that impressed me with this county was their willingness to tax themselves to help the indigent in our community who couldn't help themselves by way of the indigent healthcare sales tax. That said a lot about this county, and that was renewed a couple of years ago. It said more about our county, willing to continue to have that fund source in place to help these folks who need that help through our indigent healthcare program and the Polk healthcare plan. But behavioral health has been and is going to get bigger and bigger, I think, in terms of the county's allocations. The last thing, you've heard nationally about the opioid issue. It's real. It's been real. The county, through the state of Florida, participated in class action type settlement. The county has recently received its first allocation of that settlement. It was just over $300,000. We're anticipating to receive over $30 million in an 18-year period. A little over $1.5 million or so thereabouts a year. We might get it in different amounts in an annual basis, but the point here is the county, through Polk Vision, has helped us with some of our opioids, just the whole strategy of what is this issue, where does it exist in our community, what types of strategies do we have to deal with opioids. But this is a fund source that is clearly going to help us. In addition to the Indigent Healthcare Fund or the Polk Healthcare Plan, in addition to that, we now have reoccurring funding that will total $30 million over 18 years that has to specifically be addressed on the opioid front. The last thing I wanted, it's a big issue, but I'm going to let Commissioner Lindsey kind of take the lead on this. I just wanted to mention to you that there were 3 general categories of infrastructure that I think that Polk is having to deal with. Some of the infrastructure can be major issues. Everything from what is our 100-year source of potable water for a substantially growing community? What are our challenges with transportation to move people in and around, whether it be through transit, through rail, through road improvements? All of those things are front and center, and they find their way into the county's budget. But I wanted Commissioner Lindsey, he's been very much involved in the infrastructure front, and I'll let Commissioner Lindsey kind of take it from here and walk you through those programs.
Thank you, Bill.
Here you go, George.
Thank you. As Bill mentioned, we are facing some growth pressures, and the general economy and our revenue stream, as you mentioned, is growing at the same time. For the most part, our revenue stream can meet the demands of growth. There'll be some challenges, but that's what the budget adoption process is all about. But there are 2 elements of the infrastructure that a little extraordinary challenge, and the first one is an alternative water supply, because we don't control that. Someone else tells us how much water we have access to. So that's an additional challenge. It's not exclusively in our domain to handle. So some time ago, of course, that agency that tells us how much water we can draw from the aquifer is the Southwest Florida Water Management District. And a few years ago, they came to the conclusion, obvious, if you look at the bar chart, that blue line here, that is the capacity of the upper Floridan aquifer to meet our demands. As you see from the demand charts from 25 to 50, the ask is greater than the aquifer can meet that demand. It is oversubscribed. All of our municipal and county utility systems are given a withdrawal rate, but when you aggregate all those permits, they exceed the capacity of the aquifer to meet those demands. So they rightfully said, we can no longer issue permits to draw from that upper Floridan aquifer. When we do, we start seeing degradation of environmental effects with wetlands start drying up, rivers and streams start contracting, and certainly our water bodies are affected. So that's an ancillary harm that has to be avoided. So how do we get additional water to meet our demands if our current supply is limited? Well, the answer is the lower Floridan aquifer, which is depicted on the screen here. Whoops. Back up. Well, I'll catch up there in a minute. Let's try this again. All right, Bill, help me out. Keep clicking. I'm going the wrong way. Go back again. There we go. All right, the lower Floridan aquifer, the quality of water is not as good. It's much more brackish. It's deeper. It takes more money to get to it. It takes more money to treat it. And then when you treat it, the brine or the excess then has to be disposed of. So that's an injection well that puts it back down in the lower Floridan aquifer away from that second source. So how do we get this water from the well fields to the municipal partners? The Water Management District says we will only allow additional permits if you consolidate and create a cooperative and work together. We're not going to allow individual cities to go on their own, or the county. When I say municipalities, of course I'm including the county in that regard. So we've created this cooperative which will act as the wholesale water supplier for our municipal partners. There are two basic well fields, one in the southeast and one in the northwest. The southeast one was the driving force there a few years ago was the county. The one in the West Polk was primarily driven by the city of Lakeland. So this consolidation is a partnership of all those municipalities deciding their level of participation based on their individual demands. So their financial obligation will match their demand. So the well, as you see on the map, we got about 70 miles of transmission line, of pipes this big around, to get it to our municipal partners, and then they'll have access points along the way. The West Polk well field is about 18 months staggered behind the southeast well field, so it'll follow soon. This is a rendering of the West Polk treatment plant when it comes online. What makes this work is the various sources of revenues in order to support this large effort. The first major contribution, of course, was the Southwest Florida Water Management District, who said, we will help you pursue this alternative water supply in the form of financial support to the tune of over 40% of the cost of this endeavor. We also have access to what is called the WIFIA loan, which is a federal infrastructure loan program, very low interest rates over a very long period of time, very attractive rates. We also collectively have access to the state revolving fund, which is a state of Florida loan program to municipal governments and government entities. Again, low interest rates. We've also benefited from our local delegation coming up with state dollars to help supplement that. The story here is no individual utility, large or small, could afford the access or get access to this source of revenues without this collaborative effort. And I will tell you, but any of us in this room for any period of time, there was a time when the east side of the county didn't talk to the west, or the north and the south were different, or whatever. But these days and times, the cities and the counties cooperate more with each other than they ever have. And that's a good thing, because we all represent the same people. This is a primary example of how that works to the benefit, because we represent the same people, it benefits the same people. It is the kind of cooperation that the citizens of Polk County expect and deserve. I'm proud to be a small part of it. but it is a good example. And I will admit, in the early stages, there was some apprehension, some hesitancy. I call the bigs and the littles. The bigs being Lakeland and Polk County, and the littles, some of the smaller cities on the ridge, were apprehensive. But confidence began to grow that we are in this together. It's a collaborative effort, and it's worked very well. And we probably should use this as a model for other endeavors. Transportation. That's a challenge. Catch up with my notes here. You know, we recently had a groundbreaking ceremony for the Central Polk Parkway. The leg of the parkway that is that purple line over there on the far right, that will tie the Polk Parkway down eventually to 60, but initially to 17. And the red part of the parkway in the upper part of the map, that's, as you know, 4-laning that section of the parkway that was initially just 2 lanes. So that'll be completed shortly, 4-lane all the way. The orange piece down south of Bartow, that's an additional 2.5 miles that will take it from 17 to State Road 60, and that will close that loop. It's in design now. It's going to take a few years to get through the permitting and right-of-way acquisition. But that's coming, and then that'll tie back to State Road 60, which then goes back to the east. This is a map I saw for the first time last week at a TPO, Transportation Planning Organization, meeting on future transportation challenges in Polk County and Central Florida. As you see the State Road 60 part right here, that's the eastern part of 60. From this point north, that blue glob is the corridor of what will be the next leg going north. They hadn't defined it down. That's going through the review process now to start narrowing that down, and then eventually tying into the Poinciana Parkway to the north, which then ties it at 429 over to the interstate. And of course, that you recognize over here is a Champions Gate mess that we all have to get through. So there, in time, and they'll start narrowing that blue section and the pink section as to exactly where that route is, and bring that together.
Yeah, Chris, if I could, just look, the state has acknowledged that they have to do something to get traffic off of 27, off of Highway 17. And the next logical choice is they're coming off of the southern end of our Polk Parkway. Those 2 legs are funded to 60. They're funded. That'll be $200 million. And then what happens from 60 over to Lake Wales? And then they will turn north, probably just east of Lake Wales, and then bear back, or just west of Lake Wales. Then they'll bear back and parallel 17 and 27 along the ridge. And this is where Commissioner Lindsey was mentioning, is that once that road, it may take 15, 20 years to build that road. But the idea is for that Central Polk Parkway to connect to a Poinciana Parkway project, which is funded and will start construction, that will tie it to Osceola County Road 532, will go through over Osceola County Road 532 and tie into State Road 4, Toll Road 429. The idea that you could now get from the Polk Parkway in Lakeland and then get on a toll road and ultimately get up to I-4 or 429 through Apopka and go around Orlando, that's going to happen. But it may take 15, 20 years to do that. But that is a major roadway corridor initiative that's going to happen in Polk County.
Probably not many people in this room I was at the ribbon cutting ceremony when they opened the Polk Parkway there at South Florida Avenue. And it was mentioned then that that planning process had started 20 years earlier. So it takes a long time. In fact, if you were to plan the Polk Parkway today and could pick it up real quick, it probably should be at 548 in the Christina area, even move that further south. But when it was planned where it is, that was out in the boondocks. But it just simply takes so long and so much money to make those things come to pass. What's on the horizon? Bright Line, we've all heard about that. That's a private sector initiated project that's coming out of Miami, bringing rail up to Orlando, and eventually from Orlando Airport to the Tampa back to the west. And we've talked about if and when we'll get a stop in Polk County, and where that comes to pass is no one knows yet. This is a private sector initiative, of course, with some federal and state grants of some magnitude, but primarily driven by the private sector. So that private sector mentality will decide if and when and where stops occur along the way. A public funded initiative, of course, is the Sunrail extension that now operates in Orange, Osceola, Seminole, and I believe Volusia County, that currently has about 11 or 12 stops along its way in the various cities. There's talk about bringing it from the Poinciana area down into Polk County, Haines City, Auburndale, or Lake Alfred, and Lakeland, where stops might occur. Again, that will be a deliberative process where the demand is, where the use will be, where the revenue stream will be to support the transaction. There was conversation now, the current section, the solid purple line, that is in service. It was supposed to be turned over to the municipalities along the route a couple of years ago and assume the O&M cost of that. We had a meeting recently. Again, the question becomes, good morning, how much? How much is this going to cost? And that answer is yet to come, but it will come soon. And those costs then will be passed off to those municipalities along the route. That'd certainly be part of the deliberation as to where they stop in Polk County and who are the partners and players in that regard.
Commissioner, let me mention something about the rail. These are two completely different concepts of rail. Brightline is high-speed destination type rail. You're not going to ride Brightline to go to work every day, not likely. It's a destination. You're trying to get from someplace that's a venue, or it's more higher speeds, but it's destination-based, I think. As opposed to the Sunrail, that's a more commuter rail philosophy. It's a slower train. It is envisioned that is more stop-oriented and could be workforce use or could be commuter use. It's less destination-based and more activity-based. So two very different concepts. Commissioner Lindsey's right. Brightline is going to happen. It's going down I-4 corridor. It's in Orlando today. If you've not been to the Orlando Sea Terminal, where that Brightline terminal and spend the day and come back in an hour and a half. It's a different philosophy. That line is going to go to Tampa. The commuter rail, the verdict is still out on Sunrail. Who's going to pay for it? What's it going to cost? Those kinds of, the negotiation with the existing tracks for CSX, a lot of moving parts on the commuter rail, but that's a work in progress. The two very different concepts for rail.
Some of the projects that we have underway now, Lake Wilson Road over on the east side of the county, that's a $44 million project, just a little over 1 mile. West Pipkin Road, I'm sure most of the people in Lakeland have stumbled across that activity going on, a $59 million project. And then over 557 out of our friends in Lake Alfred up to I-4. A few years ago, that road was not even on our wish list. It was like number 40 of 42 unfunded projects. But population shifts and demands brought that one to the forefront, and it wound up being re-ranked to number 4. And activity is underway, right-of-way acquisition and construction design of that one is underway. So that list is ever being evaluated. What are the population shifts, what are the demands, and that sort of thing. But that's one that was taken from low priority to a high priority. This is an aerial of the Tipton Road, and you'll spot Geico on here real quick. The congestion occurred during construction and Sun and Fun, but once it's done, it will be a major east-west thoroughfare for that area of the county. Bill referred to his urban belt. You see that activity where the population grows, where the demand for service is growing. The projects listed down through Thompson Nursery Road Phase 2 are funded and underway in various stages. The ones beyond that are not yet funded. There is no dedicated funding source associated with making those things come to pass. Nevertheless, the demand is there, and we'll have to find a way to make that happen over time.
Let me add, the reason I'm excited, I get crazy about this slide, is again, those 12 projects are major capacity roadway projects. These aren't the intersection improvements, these aren't the turn lanes, these aren't the signalizations, these are the major capacity projects. Those first 7, Commissioner Lindsey alluded, are fully funded, almost $500 million of local monies. Those last 5 are in some phase. The board has set priorities around them. We're looking at how to fund those, when to fund those, how to leverage local monies against state and federal dollars. But collectively, you're looking at almost maybe $900 million in 12 projects. And that's only 12 of like 30 that aren't funded, some of which are not funded. But again, look at where they're located. The theme that I showed you earlier was, where's the population growing at? There. Where are the jobs growing at? There. Where's the demand for services? There. That's that urban belt that exists in Polk County today and is going to continue to exist in Polk County. And our mandate is, what are you going to do about it? And so this is the strategy that we're adopting, and we've got almost 500 million funded projects that are in that urban belt. The others, still a work in progress, but they'll happen. It may take some time, but our challenge is, how do we fund them? When do we fund them? What fund sources do we use? That kind of thing.
The current source of revenue for funding roads is a little piece of your ad valorem taxes. About 1.2 mils is dedicated to transportation. And then we also have some impact fee money that we collect annually, and that's about $35 to $40 million a year. And the sum of those two are what allows us to accumulate over time and then take the next project on the list and move it forward. There is no other dedicated funding source for that purpose. Now, when you look at our $2.4 billion budget that we're operating under now, 84% of that budget comes in silos and has lots of strings attached to it as to how you can spend it and what you can't spend it on. The indigent health care, for example, comes in that silo and can only be spent there. The tourist development tax can only be spent in certain areas. Even our building permits and fees can only be spent in that silo. So it doesn't leave a lot of other revenues to fund these kind of road systems. Of that 84% budget in silos, what's left, the commission has the greatest discretion over that. And that discretion is mainly over ad valorem taxes. And we can spend that on whatever we want to. It doesn't come in silos. And there's other challenges and pressures for those dollars. Of that money, of that ad valorem, 60% of that ad valorem goes to fund the sheriff's operation. Now, when you add other issues like his fleet, his insurance, the maintenance on his buildings, state attorneys, our share of the state attorney's office, the public defender, the coroner, parole and probation, takes those numbers up to approaching 70% of the ad valorem revenues. So it doesn't leave a lot to dedicate to transportation. Here's an interesting statistic I ran across recently. Roads capacities are rated into D, A through F. Of course, the D's and the F are the worst roads, meltdown. In 2022, we had just over 30 miles of road, city, county, and state roads, that were rated D or F. If nothing is done in 10 years, there will be just under 100 miles of roads that are D or F. And again, if nothing happens the next 10 years, we're over 300 miles of road that are ranked D and F or F. These are the unfunded projects, and again, that same, I call that Bill's band of demand through the middle of the county there. And the list of projects that today would be our primary list of projects to fund, and as events warrant, population shifts, employment shifts, some of those numbers projects may shift up and down. Others may come on the list and not on the list right now over time. But this is the list and that snapshot in time that are our highest priority roads spread throughout the county. The other pressure we see in the northeast part of the county is the demand for access to local government, county government. Currently, we have a government center on the North Winter Haven area. It's a rental facility. It's quite old. So a few years ago, the board made the decision it's time to do something for a new government center in beautiful downtown Lake Alfred, although it may have what address did you tell me it had? Haines City address, although it's in the city limits of Lake Alfred. So y'all work that out with the post office. I'm told there's a soft opening already. It's a multi-agency facility. Joe Tedder's office has got a facility in there, Marsh's office, and of course the county office is over there, and there'll be 2 courthouses. Some of those soft opening already, but there'll be a formal dedication Saturday, May the 6th, and if you have nothing else to do, come by, and we'd love to show you our new facility. So that's it from me.
And the last thing I'll tell you about the Northeast Government Center, driven by demands for services, we are working on a North Lakeland Government Center that is in the conceptual stages now, so you'll hear more about that in the future. We'll turn it over to the school board.
Good morning. All right, we're half awake in here. So, all right. Well, I'm Sara Beth Wyatt. I am the current school board chair and represent District 4 on the school board. And this is our illustrious superintendent, Superintendent Fred Heid.
Good morning, everyone. All right.
I'll let you go over a little.
So we have several quick topics for you today. We're going to talk about school district performance summary. We're going to provide you with the district enrollment and growth and demographic information, which basically feeds right into what the county was just talking about, because we've seen considerable growth in Polk County Public Schools. We'll talk about a new school allocation model and how we're staffing our schools differently than we have historically. We'll talk about how we're expanding our academy, magnet, and workforce development programs, which benefits all of us, definitely benefits us here locally. We'll talk about our financial efficiency audit, which just concluded, and we'll talk about school and student safety initiatives, because that always remains a priority amongst our community.
So starting out, we heard a lot about how much the county's growing, and our student population is no different than that. Polk County Public Schools is now the 7th largest school district in Florida, and I think if you watch in the next couple of years, we'll probably be number 6 in a year or two. We're also the 24th largest district in the U.S. Our enrollment grew over 7,000 students this year. That's since the end of last school year. So this time last year, we had 110,000 students. We now have 117,000 students. Polk's enrollment growth comes when nationally everywhere is declining for public schools. We'll talk a little bit more about that later because that includes our large counties that we typically compare ourselves to in Florida. But we are continually seeing great growth over consecutive school years. Nearly 1.3 million students have left public schools since the pandemic across the nation, and that is not our problem here in Polk by any means. So some of our demographic data, when we were here just about a year ago, our Hispanic population was about 37% of our students. Since last year, that has grown to 41.1%. Our Black African American students are 20.3%. White students are 34%, multiracial 2.7%, Asian 1.5%, Pacific Islander 0.2%, and American Indian, Alaskan Native 0.2%. Most interesting, I think, are our economically disadvantaged students are 78.8%. You will all notice that we have free lunch at all of our schools. A lot of that is because it is truly a service for all of our students. Our homeless population is 2.3%. That's over 2,500 students in Polk County are homeless and living either in cars, in hotels, on the streets, but do not have a stable home. Our English language learners is 9.7%. That is, majority of that comes from Spanish fluency, but we also have a high Creole population and many other languages that we also support. So if you have any special language talents, let us know, because an email goes out probably once a month for a high need language that we do not currently have.
Absolutely.
And then our students with disability is 14.7%. So this is a little bit of the graph that I mentioned earlier. So Polk County, since COVID, has grown 7% in our student population. Since last year, that is 5% in our student population. Many districts dipped down during COVID as students either their parents pulled them out to do homeschool, to do virtual programs, but they were not part of the traditional public school system in Polk County. Broward has decreased 5% since 2019-2020 when COVID hit. Duval has decreased 1% since that time. Hillsborough has risen 1%, but most of that happened in the last school year. Palm Beach is up 3% since 2019, but again, a great majority of that has happened since last school year. They also dipped down during COVID. Orange has dipped about 2%. Miami-Dade has grown 2% since COVID, but they lost several students during COVID, so 7% is since last year. And I'll let you talk about school staffing.
The school staffing allocation model. So one of the things that happens when you talk about growth, you have two challenges. You have the challenge of ensuring that you have enough seats for your students. You have the secondary challenge, which is making sure, most importantly, or more importantly, we don't have staff to fill all those seats. And even though Polk County Public Schools has grown 77,000 students, it's now 7,200 based off our last FTE count, and it's quite likely that we could hit 8,000 students by the end of the school year. Here's what's most interesting. With that considerable growth, at the same time last year, we were averaging about 298 active instructional vacancies on any given day. So it's almost 300 vacancies that we had that we were filling as quickly as we could. Some of those are reoccurring vacancies and had long-term subs. Others are because in Florida you can retire at any time. And after COVID, if people became eligible for retirement, no matter how much we asked them or begged them to stay to the end of the year, many of them said thank you, but no thank you. And this year, even though we have 7,000 more students, we are averaging only 140 instructional vacancies in Polk County. And so we've done a much better job at not only recruiting, but we're also doing a much better job at employee retention. And that's incredibly important for us because just 4 years ago, our average retention rate was 56%. We're now over 82%, just 4 years later. And I give a lot of credit to Superintendent Byrd and the team that she put in place at the district office, because that was a new department that she developed to help focus on employee retention, and it's really paid off for us. But part of what we have to focus on as well is how do we adequately staff our schools. I use guidance counselors quite frequently when I explain this slide because it's one of the areas that has the greatest disproportionality across our school district. And I'll just give you a quick example. A traditional high school that has 1,800 students in it will typically be assigned a minimum of 4 guidance counselors. An elementary school, and we do have some, that are 1,200 to 1,800 students in size, only was allocated 1 guidance counselor. And so as a school district, and there were reasons for that, because during the last recession, as school districts had to tighten their belt, as the state tightened its belt, there was less revenue coming into school districts because we were getting a prorated amount versus what we traditionally had grown accustomed to. And as a result, we had to make sure that we could operate within our means. So at the time, if positions became open, we would cancel those positions or close them out, consolidate positions where we could, and that led to, again, this great disproportionality. So really worked with the school board last school year to say we need a new staffing allocation model. It's a very simple way of saying this number of students equates to this number of staff, right? How many teachers, and we basically do that based off class size. We also do it based off specificity of program needs. So if a school has a specialized program, whether it's an academy or a magnet school, or that school has a special needs program or an ELL program, we might staff them somewhat differently to make sure that they have adequacy in their ability and flexibility for them to schedule appropriately for those students. So in year one, we actually focused on adding and leveling out some of our administrators and our school clerical staff. Elementary school clerical staff, their staffing was just as disproportionate as it was with guidance counselors versus middle schools and high schools. It was not uncommon to have one superstar clerical person who was the bookkeeper, the registrar, and the principal secretary all at once. And if any of you have ever seen those people performing those roles, to perform all three, to perform one adequately is impressive. To perform all three at the same time is incredibly difficult. So we said, okay, let's focus on clerical staff. This year we're focusing more on the guidance counselors, other support staff positions, speech therapists, occupational therapists, school psychologists, because as we heard earlier, we all as a community are seeing more mental and behavioral health needs than ever before. And that's starting at a very young age. And these students don't have the mechanism or the tools for de-escalation strategies, for anger management, for conflict resolution. All those things are things we're having to incorporate within the school day and provide those supports for them. And so as we continue, and we knew, realistically, we could not add all the positions we truly needed at our schools, or we felt that we needed in our schools, to adequately support our students and our community in 1 year, right? The cost would be incredibly expensive and actually outside our reach. So we worked on a 4-year developmental plan. And so each year you'll hear we'll be targeting new populations of employees to bring them on board. And as a result of that also, we're starting to get away from contracted services, which is important because, for example, school districts is not uncommon because of vacancies, large number of vacancies. I'll give you, best example I can provide you is speech therapists. There are not enough speech therapists in Polk County. There are not enough speech therapists across the entire nation. It is a position that is incredibly difficult to hire. Most of the colleges and universities that have supported that program have closed. They no longer even offer the program. And so we're having to be very competitive. Because we contract out that service, we typically pay about 38% premium above and beyond what we would normally pay in salaries. And so it becomes incredibly burdensome for us financially. So we've got to find alternative solutions, and there'll be some things that we're bringing to the board here in the very near future to help counteract that and bring those employees back to Polk County and not rely as heavily on contracted service.
I think this is starting.
School performance summary. So this last school year, 3rd grade, we had a really good year. Polk County was one of only 11 school districts in the entire state that actually saw 3rd grade reading scores improve. That's a huge improvement, right? And that's a huge testament to our 3rd grade teachers. 6 of our schools saw no change from the prior year. 50 school districts saw a decrease in those at level 3 as compared to the prior year. And overall, the state actually declined in 3rd grade reading performance. So Polk really stood out. Now, I have to admit the flip side of that. The truth was our 3rd grade reading scores were not very high to begin with. And so any improvement was definitely necessary. It was done. Sadly, we're ranked 56th in ELA out of 67 school districts. We've got a long way to go. Now that's average is based off all of our student performance in English language arts, not just 3rd grade. But 3rd grade is a strong indicator of what our trajectory should be, because if more kids are coming out of 3rd grade reading on grade level, that means we're spending less time remediating students, and all those millions of dollars that typically get spent on remediation can be pushed into enrichment and acceleration, and that's really where we need to be. 3rd grade reading, 50 or 60% of our 84 eligible elementary schools saw a decline in the number of students reading on level 1. Level 3 means you're on grade level. Level 2 means you're typically 1 grade level or 1 year below grade level. Reading on level 1 is 2 or more years below grade level. And level 1 is a scary one because, quite frankly, that could be 3 to 6 years that you're below in grade level performance. And so we have to fill that gap. 12 of our schools saw a double-digit decrease in the number of students reading on level 1. 11 schools saw a 5 to 9 percentage point decrease in students reading at level 1. 48% of our 84 eligible elementary schools saw an improvement in the number of students reading at level 3. 15 schools saw a double-digit increase. 13 schools saw a 5 to 9 percentage point increase, and 6 schools had no change from the prior year. But this is where you start to see the proof is in the pudding. So last school year, because of third grade reading scores, let's be honest, a lot of our elementary schools, and especially elementary schools that saw double-digit improvements in their reading in third grade, that gets calculated to their school grade. And so what you see here is I'm very proud of the fact we doubled the number of A schools last school year. We almost doubled the number of B schools. We saw an increase in C school rated, or schools rated with a C, by more than 20. And we saw the number of D schools decline by 24. All of our F schools last year exited. Every single F school that we had prior, the 7 that we had the year prior, then I arrived here, all improved. We have one F school, or one school, let me rephrase that, because I hate saying it that way. We have one school that's currently rated an F. It's Elbert Elementary School, and it has never, ever had a score of less than a C in its entire history. We really don't know what happened there, but we've been paying a lot of attention to that school, providing additional resources, and I can assure you that school will be a C or better by the end of the school year. And so we saw a lot of great improvement last year. But again, on the flip side, I have to acknowledge there's a lot of room left for us to continue to improve.
He got to talk about the test scores because I wanted to talk about academies. So academy and magnet programs are one of my favorite things to talk about because we have some great academies in Polk. We are rated second in the nation to Nashville, where the academy model was established. So one of the goals with Superintendent Heid coming here was really making sure that we could expand our academies across the county. How many of you have heard of CFAA, our Central Florida Aerospace Academy, in Lakeland? How many of you live within 10 to 20 minutes of Lakeland Linder Airport? Not very many. So if you live in Davenport, Haines City, even Winter Haven, Lake Wales, going to CFAA in Lakeland is really not an option for those students. So establishing CFAA Winter Haven, which the ribbon cutting is next Wednesday, if anybody is interested, really gives students across the district an opportunity. That's something that we're looking to do for all of our academies to make sure that they're available, not necessarily at every school, because we want to make sure that we can have many different industries represented, but we want to make sure that they're all at multiple schools so that students in Davenport have the same opportunities as students in Lakeland, as students in Fort Meade, as students in Auburndale, just really so that they're represented across the county. We've also looked to create some new programs aligned with partnerships. One of those is air traffic control. So using the Bartow Air Tower, which is a privately owned air tower, we can do air traffic control training. Those students, which I know some of my colleagues and I have already asked Superintendent Heid if we can enroll in this program, those students will graduate high school and have the earning potential of making 6 figures in their first year out of high school as an air traffic controller because it is such a high-need industry. This also goes along with our LPN and medical assistant programs, where we've been able to partner with local medical providers and local hospitals to make sure that not only do those students get to have the opportunity to work in the hospitals and to work with the hospitals, but our hospitals now know exactly who's coming out of high school. They know who is in the job market. They're able to train them the way that they would like them to be trained. There's no better opportunity than to be able to truly get the workforce that you want, but also to train them exactly how you would like them to, as opposed to having to break bad habits when they get there. Also looking at network IT and network security. Our high school civics academies will launch next year at 6 schools. This is in huge partnership with many of our municipalities, making have students that A, know what a water treatment plant operator does, but B, that are even interested in that job market. We find that a lot of our students don't know what all options are out there. They see the things that they see every day. So police officers, teachers, doctors, lawyers, but we have a lot of really cool jobs in Polk County that they don't even know exist. And many of them are in our local government, so making sure that they know what is out there. And then last one that I'm really excited about is our Hospitality Academy at Ridge Community High School. So this is in partnership with the UCF Rosen College of Hospitality and Tourism. And they are really tapping into, we have a lot of theme parks in Central Florida. And while many of our students already work in the theme parks as entry-level jobs, there are a lot of great job opportunities in management and in upper-level industries in the hospitality industry that we would love to have them prepared for. Additionally, we, in November, December last year, approved Head of Programs, which is a new title for our schools. It's essentially an assistant principal that is a 12-month assistant principal, and they are specifically over the academies for their school to really make sure that we are able to have more accountability for our programs, that we're able to maintain the data of who's enrolling in which academies. Are they there all 3 years? Are they there for just one class? And what industries are they going into after school? Because it's great for them to go into the industry that they were in an academy for, but it's also great for them to learn that the dream job they thought was their dream job isn't really their dream job before they go and pay for a 4-year degree in it. So really being able to track our students further after graduation. Magnet schools. I know Superintendent Heid and I are both really proud because we're a little bit competitive. And Magnet School, the Magnet School Assistance Grant is a competitive grant. So we have many grants that we apply for that if you apply it, you get it based on your student population. These are not that way. So our magnet schools, we were awarded for 5 of our schools this year. So it's $6.2 million in year 1, and there's subsequent funding in the next 3 to 5 years for each of these as well. But I think the most exciting is that we were the 2nd highest award in the state of Florida, and by far the highest award per pupil in the county. So those will go to Garner for a STEM Polytech Academy, Stevens for an IB Academy, Roosevelt Blake Academy is a Cambridge program, and Bethune and Jenkins are also Cambridge feeder pattern programs. And then workforce development. So paid internships and externships. One of the things that we did under Superintendent Byrd's tenure was make sure that these academy students that we say are ready for the workforce on day 1 after graduation were able to come back and work in Polk County Public Schools. Because we can preach it all day long, but when our job descriptions say they have to have a college degree and 3 to 5 years of experience, we're not really walking the walk. So all of our job descriptions that deal with some of our construction academies, our graphic design, that are academies that we feel that those students can come and work for us, like we're saying they can go and work for you right out of high school, we're modified to make sure that they can come straight into the job force in Polk County Public Schools. We took that a step further at our last board meeting and approved some paid internship programs specifically for our maintenance construction academies to make sure that they have opportunities to intern in the district office so that we can get them before they even graduate. We're also working with several of our partners locally, so we have some grant funds to do paid internships across the county. So if you feel that your business would love to have an intern, but maybe it's not in the budget this year, please email Superintendent Heid because we would love to help you find a high school intern that will be great for your business. I'm going to let Superintendent Heid talk a little bit about some of our more explicit and direct partnerships.
So we're having to find that we have to be a lot more creative, and some of you have attended the community forums. You've heard me say this, so I'll try and do an abbreviated version. We use SROs in all of our schools, school resource officers, and that's a paid law enforcement officer. Obviously, the school district gets a benefit. We get an armed, very well-trained officer on our campus to help promote safety. The county benefits because we pay 80% of the salary for that employee. They pay the alternate 20%, and so when schools are closed, they get an extra officer to help serve and protect our community. So it's a really good partnership for us. And so we're going to take that model, and we're now trying to apply it in some of our trades areas where it's becoming incredibly difficult to hire people. Try and hire an electrician. Try and hire a diesel mechanic right now to come to public education. They don't, because their earning potential is 4 or 5 times greater in the private sector than it is in a traditional school sector or in the public education sector. But the problem is industry is still knocking on our door. I can't go to a meeting without somebody telling me we need more HVAC, we need more plumbers, we need more electricians, I need people with CDLs, I need people basically who can do all these things. And that's great, and we want to be responsive to that, but here's what we're starting to do. We're starting to now say, then partner with us. Let's do what we do with the law enforcement officers, and let me pay a portion of your employee's salary to come on our campus and teach those classes. Now, you benefit as an employer because they're learning and developing under current industry standards. Because let's be honest, in public education, as well intended as we are, we create a curriculum for a program, and then 4 years later, industry has evolved, but our program has not. And so it's very frustrating for some employers to realize, well, yeah, you're training kids, but you're training them on an antiquated approach. And it's like, well, how could it be antiquated? It's just 4 years old until you look at your phone, right? You buy your phone, 5 minutes later, the newest model comes out. And so at the end of the day, we have to realize, how do we keep pace with that? And how do we provide a quality product for our local employers? Well, we've got a partner. And so that's what we're now offering. And we have 2 or 3 companies right now who are going to begin partnering with us that directly, where they're going to send us employees for 2 or 3 periods a day, and they get to pick, and this is what we told the employer, tell me if they'll be there the first 3 periods a day, or you want them to be there at the end of the day, and we'll schedule those students accordingly. And then the added benefit they get is all those students that come through the program, not only are they learning current industry standard, let's be honest, they're going to cherry pick the kids that they want to encourage to apply to come work in their industry. And so there's a mutual benefit. I get great teachers, I get great programs, our students and families get great access and great opportunities. Aligning our capstone projects to our partners, again, making sure that what the things we're asking our students to do are completely aligned to current needs and current interests. And we're also reviewing programs, and part of that, the accountability that Sara Beth spoke about a little while ago with our academies, is if an academy is in decline, then we need to do a deep analysis. Is it in decline because of poor leadership? Is it in decline because of lack of interest? Is it in decline, meaning that nobody has an interest in it any longer? Then why are we supporting an academy that students no longer have an interest in? How do we retool and reintroduce a new program that they do have a high interest in? Because that's something that historically school districts have done as well, is we've created programs based off adult interests and not necessarily based off student interests and or needs. And so we've got to continuously evolve in that regard as well. Our vocational trades high schools are phenomenal locations for our students. They're now truly becoming an actual extension to high school for many of our students to pursue certain industry certifications and opportunities like fire EMT. And so we're creating the pathways for that. There are scholarships available for our students, so there's nothing but opportunities here in Polk County for our students. And we've even gone so far as to work with some of our local providers to tell them, listen, I'll retool at Travis or Ridge. You tell me which location makes sense to you. If you need diesel mechanics, I'll reconstruct that classroom space. I'll bring it up to industry standard with all the equipment. You can actually run your business out of that campus, but you've got to guarantee me that my kids can get access to the shop floor and that you have at least 2 certified instructors on campus the entire time. So the company again benefits, and then we benefit. We have to remember our schools and some of our facilities were closed, right? A lot of times. And so why not extend the opportunity for someone else to utilize that facility in a more meaningful and more cost-efficient way? It's a huge ROI back to our taxpayers as well. Finance, I think this one's mine. So we just completed our efficiency audit, and the committee of 35 community-based individuals who served on it, I'm the only school-based employee who served on the committee. We were very transparent with that, and we did that intentionally for 2 reasons. Number one, to build community trust. If you do an audit and you share the results with the community, there's always that lingering thought, well, what didn't they tell us? What was in the audit that they didn't reveal, they didn't share, right? So we didn't do that. We brought in 35 of our community-based leaders, everyone from faith-based organizations to some of our municipality leaders to others who are leaders in industry and business. The second reason we brought them in wasn't just for transparency, it was because, let's be honest, my core business is education. I'm not a finance person, not a business person. So we've got to tap into those who have that area of expertise because they can make recommendations, say, well, Mr. Heid, if you're looking to save money and put more money into the classroom space, because that was the whole objective, are we spending our money wisely? And then if not, how can we retool and reconfigure so we can push more money to where it matters most, which is at the classroom level? And so we invited those 35 individuals in, and that report will be released here very soon. They should have received a draft copy. I know I shared it, but it may be somewhat delayed, and then we'll meet again one more time because they'll actually be advising me on several topics I'll be bringing before the board, such as rezoning. And I know you've all heard about rezoning recently, right? Thanks to our neighbors in Hillsborough County. So we do have to talk about rezoning. We have some schools, and we have situations where students are literally bused past 2 schools before they get to their school, and they're not even attending their neighborhood school. I've got parents who email me every year, Mr. Heid, I can open my door and I can see a school from my front yard. Why doesn't my child attend that school? And so we've got to talk about how to do that. We've got schools that are underutilized, that are only at 50 or 60% occupancy. And so yes, building schools makes sense in certain communities like Haines City and Davenport because we don't have facilities there, right? I'd love to say we have schools there that we could repurpose and retool, but we don't have them. So we're going to have to do a combination of new construction. But let's be honest, as taxpayers, you want to also know what is the school district doing to optimize their current facilities so that they're not relying solely on new construction, because it's incredibly expensive. We just received a quote for a new high school. Talk about sticker shock. So Davenport High School, our Taj Mahal of a high school, and it is an absolute beautiful campus. If you've never been there, let us know. We'd love to give you a tour. And it was value engineered, and it's 3 stories, so it's not a sprawling campus. I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous. $110 million for that campus. Right now, just 2 years later, a new high school, Hillsborough County's building one, $175 million. Orange County's building one, $200 million. We're looking at a price tag of anywhere from $135 to $155 million just for the building. That doesn't include the land. So it's gotten incredibly expensive, so we have to make sure that we're maximizing our opportunities. And so what some of the suggestions that the outside company gave us was, how do we maximize and optimize? And some of this was, gradual optimization. There are no quick fixes in public education. There's always people involved, there's emotions involved, there's culture involved, there's history involved. Tenor Rock High School is a good example. When Tenor Rock High School was initially zoned, it was going to draw a large portion of students out of Auburndale. Well, if you're a bloodhound, and I hear some laughter, you were not going to leave Auburndale to go to Tenor Rock, an unproven high school. And so that became a problem. So now Tenor Rock has been sitting at about 50% occupancy since it was constructed. Now finally we're seeing some new construction around that school, so we'll see the growth happening there. And that's important, because schools have to have a culture. Someone has to own a school. A community has to own the school. And they kind of were out there on their own without any ownership and any partnership. And so hopefully we'll see those things change. But gradual change has to be the way we have to approach this. So we've done a lot financially to optimize and create a better ROI for you, our taxpayers. So we implemented and piloting a new vehicle lease program. When we return those vehicles, we'll actually get a rebate back on all of those vehicles. We've also right-sized or value-sized our fleet, meaning if Sara Beth is a welder and has to have all kinds of heavy equipment, she will get an F-250 with the right suspension and everything else. If I'm a pesticide person in a district, I don't need an F-250 dually, right? It's not cost efficient for me. All I do is carry on 2 canisters that I spray the campuses with after school hours, because you can't do it when students are around. And in fact, we usually use borax and a combination of things, so we don't use a lot of pesticides on our campuses. But why would they have a truck? They don't need a truck. So we've value-sized and right-sized our fleet as well. We're building a new school, a new partnership. This company has been doing this for a number of years. They build typically with charter schools. We are the first school district to operate and implement the lease-to-own program. So over the next 20 years, we will have an annual lease payment. Here are the benefits. If this company runs into any cost overruns, unless we ask them to change something in the building, an architectural change or revision, we owe nothing. So if they have cost overruns, has nothing to do with us, they still have to hit their deadline of August for that school to be open. We've actually, for the first time ever, budgeted all of our preventative maintenance. We've never done that as a school district. I will tell you, I'd be surprised if any school district in the state of Florida can claim they've done that they proactively budgeted their preventative maintenance. So we're essentially escrowing every single year for the next 20 years. So in year 7, that school will get a whole new paint job. At year 15, we're replacing the roof. At year 20, HVAC, boilers, and everything else get replaced. Guaranteed. And we prepay for that. I don't have to borrow anything. I can walk away from the lease at any time with no penalty to us. And it's just a perfect situation for us. So right now, everything sounds great, so we're waiting for proof of concept. I toured the building just 2 days ago, or last week, and it was Monday, and it was gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. They've made incredible improvements, and they have to build to our code. Let me rephrase that. They can't just build an inferior product. It has to meet all code requirements. So that's going to be an interesting project for us. Restructuring our bond debt last year, my first year here, our team restructured some minor bond debt that we had. We save about $200,000 a year in insurance as a result. Contract elimination. This last school year, we eliminated $7 million in contracted services and brought all of those dollars back to the school district. This year, at the end of the school year, we're probably looking anywhere from $5 to $6 million in contract elimination. And again, bringing those things back to the school district and bringing those dollars back to the school district. Grant funds, as Sarah Beth pointed out, these are not the kind of endowment grants that the state of Florida issues, where they say, you know what, we had leftover money, Mr. Heid, based off the number of third grade level 1 readers, we're going to give you $2 million to run a summer reading program. All you have to do is submit the application. And school districts get that all the time because the state has remaining dollars. That's not what these grants are. These are truly competitive grants where we've competed against other counties and other states. In the last 18 months, we've been successful at receiving over $66 million in new revenue and bringing that into Polk County. And I feel it's important for us to be aggressive on the grant writing front because, let's be honest, the state, until very recently, hasn't really changed the FEFP formula, and we can complain about statewide funding till we're blue in the face. Up until very recently, it wasn't going to change, and we're very excited to announce that both the Senate and the House have bills proposed that are passing through. Hopefully we'll come to some conclusion here, but both of them will bring considerable new revenue to Polk County based off changes to the FEFP or student allocation model. We've improved our overall fund balance to 9 to 10%. That's at the same time that we've increased the number of employees that we have, and that simultaneously we've been issuing raises. So I was part of negotiating 2 raises for our 2 contracts negotiations with our teachers unions in less than 12 months. Did the same thing with our vocational trades groups to make them more competitive. All of our teachers now at the base minimum requirement of $47,500. And now all new revenue, and it was important for me to get that done last year, and we did so very aggressively. We had to get to that before I can start addressing salary compression because the state wasn't allowing us to didn't give us enough flexibility with those dollars. And I understand why. They wanted to make sure we got to $47,500 first and not just give pay raises to your veteran staff. And I get that, right? There's a give and take. But thankfully the state said, and we anticipated that as soon as you hit that number, all new revenue that the state provides us for that program can now be used to offset our teachers who have had to deal with salary compression. So essentially, we have 10-year veteran staff that are making just as much, in some instances actually less, than a brand new teacher. And so we've got to rectify that over the next 2 years. So all of that revenue that comes in from the state will be funneled towards salary compression. And then we have, again, trying to be creative and innovative with partnerships. So some of our schools that are underutilized, we were very lucky, and I want to say thank you to several individuals. I won't name them here today, because I don't know, maybe they don't want to be named, and I should ask them permission first. But they were contacted by Jeff Bezos Foundation. They were looking to expand their preschool presence across the state of Florida. They ultimately referred them to us. We toured them through 3 facilities in our school district. And right now they've selected Oscar J. Pope Elementary School. And what we're working through with them is they will offer a year-round Montessori tuition-free program on that campus. And that's one of those campuses that had less than 50% occupancy. So now, again, we're raising our ROI. And the hope is that as students enter into that program, they'll stay at Oscar J. Pope, because what's happened at Oscar J. Pope is they're down to just about 230 students. We've sent additional students to that school to offset that low enrollment, but because of magnet schools and school choice, and there's just no turnover in that community yet, as far as construction and properties, so until that happens, you start to see a little bit of the gentrification that may occur there. That school is very much landlocked, and so we have to do something to reinvigorate that community and get them reinterested in that campus. We also have to ask for additional state funding, and I just talked about this. So in the midst of our efficiency audit, the Senate and the House both put out proposals that will bring new revenue to Polk County. The amount varies. The amount varies anywhere from $64 million to $110 million in additional revenue for Polk County. They've also provided us with greater flexibility in both bills. They've taken out some of the required categoricals, and they've given us more flexibility. So some of the categoricals have been eliminated. Others are required to remain because they're we have statutory obligations to do so, such as school safety. But we're not required necessarily to spend the full allocation in that area, whereas historically, whatever you were allocated in that categorical, you had to spend there. So let's say I have $10 million and I only need to spend $9 this year. I now can take that leftover 1 million and move it someplace else. And we did not have that flexibility before. So we're excited to see what actually comes out of this. And this was good timing. I'm going to say that we had our crystal ball and we projected that this was going to happen. So. I just talked about this, the new Appropriations Act and the efficiency audit. The goal again was to return funding back to the classroom level. What they found generally across the board was that we operate incredibly efficiently as a school district. And we'll share that, and obviously this will be something we release publicly. So I'm very proud of that, and thankfully, that's not just my doing. That meant we were doing it before I arrived here. But again, that typically is a thought that people have when they think about school districts. There's always this immediate thought that, well, where's all the money going, right? And it's going to all these high-paid salaries. Well, that's not true. And while the overall we spend a great deal of money on salaries and benefits, when you compare us to the 7 largest school districts in the state of Florida, all of our employee categories, on average, we rank 7th out of 7th. Now there are 2, there's one, if I recall correctly, school guidance counselors, they rank 5th, and there's one other where we rank 6th. But in all other categories, and many of you have been to my community meetings, you've seen those slides, we rank 7th out of 7th for classroom teachers, for paraeducators, for everyone else. So it just shows we've got to keep investing to catch up. Because the gap between 7th place and even 6th place, in some instances, is as much as $20,000. And I know a lot of people say, well, Mr. Heid, I'm not worried about Miami-Dade. We're not in competition with Miami-Dade or Duval County or Palm Beach. And you're right. You are absolutely right. But we sure as heck are in competition with Hillsborough and Orange County on a daily basis. Every single day. So we've got to have salaries and opportunities, and we've got to create a culture in Polk County, more importantly, that people feel valued and respected, and they want to be here and they want to stay here.
So our priorities for the future are maintaining our strong workforce, maximizing our operational efficiencies, improving school staffing, undergoing our comprehensive rezoning for K-12, which you will hear more about that in the coming months. We're looking at starting with high schools, moving then to middle schools, and moving then to elementary schools. So it will be a phased approach, but you will hear more about those in the coming months. Maximizing our community partnerships, expanding early college options, and ensuring student safety. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
So we didn't put a slide in here on student safety because then I always feel an obligation to bullet out all the things that we're doing. We do not disclose all of the safety procedures and policies and strategies that we utilize for obvious reasons, right? As soon as you tell somebody this is what we do to prevent you from gaining access to a campus, you sit there and try and figure out how to circumvent our process if you really had a desire. So this last school year, we implemented random screenings. So out of our secondary schools, anytime and it was truly random. It was random across the district. Every school did not screen students every day unless that school had received a threat. We're very grateful for our partners in law enforcement. They do an amazing job telling us when something pops up on social media. And there, unfortunately, across the nation, because of social media, there are all these generic threats that are always out there circulating amongst students. And it's typically just something that says, don't come to school on Friday, something bad's going to happen, or there's going to be a shooting. It never mentions a school, it never mentions a county, and then they do all their due diligence. I tell you, our sheriff's office, don't do anything inappropriate on social media. I'm just going to tell you that, all right? Because we'll figure it out. But they're able to tell us, Mr. Heid, this has nothing to do, this originated in Kentucky, this originated in New York. It's just our kids tag it, and then it gets shared. And to be, with all due respect, we can never take one of these things and just assume it's not going to happen. So we take every proactive step that we can. And so if a school receives a threat like that, or something's written on a bathroom wall, or those kinds of things, we make sure we do a random screening that next day, and we increase the number of students that we screen. So whereas on a typical day, we may screen every 10th student that walks through the door, in those situations, we may screen every 3rd to 5th student walking through the door. Thankfully this year, as a result of our random screenings, we've only identified one weapon. Now that's good for several reasons. Number one, we're still screening students. And that means we're not getting weapons on our campuses, which is a positive. The other positive that's happening is if you're ever on a campus when we are doing a screening, watch the trash cans outside at the front doors or the side doors. Once the word gets out amongst students that we're screening, vape pens start to go into the trash cans. And so a very positive secondary outcome of our random screening has been a reduction in vaping and THC on our campuses. We just received a $2.2 million, I wish we got $300 million in the settlement agreement. We got $2.2 million in the tobacco vape pen settlement, and all of those dollars will go to be reinvested into schools next year. We're putting vape detection devices in our middle schools and our high school bathrooms. And so what that will essentially do, there's no cameras, but it picks up on a molecular level certain things. It will pick up on tobacco and THC products, and it will send a text message to the school administration and say, someone's in the bathroom, it triggered at this time in bathroom number 301, pull up the cameras, and then we can see which kids came and went, and then we just track down those students and we search them. And we can basically secure those items. And the whole goal here, and some of this will also go into education programs, right? Tobacco and THC cessation. We've got to get students to understand it's incredibly dangerous, especially some of the products they're using, which are not manufactured by companies. Sometimes they're manufactured in somebody's basement, and there's true hazards that come with that. So we are seeing a secondary improvement there. Next year's screenings will not be random. We'll continue to do random screenings and wanding at school events, like it could be a performance, football games, those kinds of things. But we are moving to a much better detection system. And so as students walk through, very much like the tobacco THC scanners do, if 5 of us were to walk through and I have something on my body using the software that they use, it will take a picture of me, send it to the administration, say, Mr. Heid or Fred Heid needs to be searched again. Please pull that student aside. And we have administrators at all entrances so they can readily grab that student and say, okay, let's go for a secondary screening. We've also done additional enhancements. We're working with law enforcement, as you know. We're going to one unified command. It's been my recommendation to the school district. That does not mean that we've turned our backs on our local municipalities. We've met with many of the chiefs. We've had the conversations with them. All of them have acknowledged they're actually going to benefit because they have vacancies and they can absorb these employees back into their system. But they can all maintain a point of contact with students. That's been the biggest concern is we've built relationships with students. How do we maintain those? They're not banned from our campuses. We want them to still come on campus. Do your DARE program, do PALS program, do all the other programs like dating violence and internet safety and cell phone usage, do all the programs you historically have done. We've actually reserved all of the overtime. They still have access to all of the overtime that they've always had, so they can maintain relationships with students. And what we've done, hopefully you see this, is now I have a policing authority on my campus, and I also have a community group on my campus through law enforcement. It's a very different relationship that they can now have with law enforcement from their local city or municipality than they would if they know that that's the same person that could arrest them and charge them with something. And then we're also working with the sheriff's office. So just like we have drug dogs, and we bring drug dogs through our parking lots and our campuses randomly throughout the year, we also are working with them to secure dogs, canines, that specialize in gunpowder residue. And so they can detect firearms on campuses. And so we'll actually be working with them in partnership. There are several other things we're looking to do to enhance our school entrances and other areas on our campuses, but unfortunately, I'm not at liberty to disclose those. So I just want to reassure you that obviously safety is our main priority. You cannot have an environment that's conducive to teaching and learning unless it's safe and people feel valued, safe in that environment. So that is our number one priority, is to make sure our students and staff are safe each day, and then obviously delivering a quality educational experience to everybody involved. So, thank you.
Thank you all. Again, if you have any partnership opportunities, you want to email to Superintendent Heid. His email address is listed here. And next we have Dr. Joy Jackson.
Good morning, everybody. The last section here, and you just saw me trip, it's because we've been sitting for a while. So I don't want anybody else to leave, but I want everybody to stand up for 30 seconds, and we're going to shift our weight, get our blood flowing, make sure we don't have any deep venous thromboses, and get our brains working, because I'm going to give you the last section on public health. All right, rock back and forth. Okay, now everybody sit down, and I'm going to give you a wild ride for just a few minutes. Sitting here, I sort of changed my opening remarks, the school district, how important they are and what they do impacts the health of everybody in the community. Health is not just your healthcare provider, it's the resources and the attention and what we do to keep ourselves safe. So I really want to express appreciation to our partners for what they do. So I'm going to briefly go over the sorts of things that impact our health, some of our population demographics, health across the lifespan. Our needs vary from when you're a very young child to when you're elderly. What are some of the health issues in Polk County? And importantly, what are we doing locally to combat some of these health issues? So there's tons of data. Oh my gosh. There's so much data which are little snippets all over the place. There's data sources, data resources, from vital statistics data to hospital data to healthcare data to law enforcement data. So the Robert Wood Johnson model, County Health Rankings and Roadmaps, is a public health population model. You say, well, what does that mean? That means that the same data is monitored for all the 3,000 and some counties across the nation. So you can go back and look at Polk County's data, and you can look at trending. So it creates actionable subsets of data so we can monitor over time, how are we doing? Is it perfect? Is it everything? No. But it gives us a framework of something that otherwise would make my head explode because there's too much information. This model is divided into two big things. Health outcomes, which is what is our health right now? How long are we living? What are we dying from? And what is our quality of life, which is very subjective. But that's what is happening now. Health factors are things that impact our future health. That's really public health. What is going on now regarding health behaviors of our community? Are we smoking? Are we drinking too much? Are we using drugs? Are we having sex with the wrong people? Are you not getting enough sleep? So personal health behaviors, clinical care. Can you get to that healthcare provider when you need it? Or when you don't know you need it, but you really do need it? The social determinants of health, which is where we live, work, play, socialize, impacts our health, and I would include educate, hence the very good discussions we had, and our physical environment. How is our air quality, our water quality? Do we have broadband access? Do we have good protective things within our community? So let's look at the factors that impact our health outcomes. So this is stuff that's happening now to impact our future health. Health behaviors make up 30% of our health outcomes. 30%. So whether I am overweight, whether I smoke, whether I drink, contributes 30% to our overall health outcomes. Clinical care. Can we access quality of care when we need it? As a physician, before I read all this stuff, I thought, well, gosh, obviously our health is related to whether we can get to a provider. That's only 20%. Social determinants of health, which is the economics of the community, the social connectiveness, the safety, having a place to go to be safe, having schools that are safe. That makes up 40% of our health outcomes, and then our physical environment makes up 10%. So this is the overall structure, and if you want to go on the website for County Health Rankings, you can deep dive. There's just not time to talk about it, but I think it's fascinating, but I'm a data nerd. All right, so let's take a couple of minutes and talk about clinical care. I think if I asked any of you, what is important for clinical care? Obviously, we need enough providers. They need to be located where people can get to them. We need to have transportation to get there. We need to have hours that people can get there and not get fired because they took time off work. There's just so much we need. Oh, and very importantly, we need providers that look like ourselves. Studies have shown if the population can get to a provider that gets them, culturally, racially, ethnically, gender, we need enough providers that meets the need of the public, that connects that bond. Now, frankly, if you've got a UTI or you've got a cough or a cold, it's fine to go to an urgent care or a quick spot. But if you get chronic health conditions, or if you're a parent worrying about your child, you really want a healthcare setting where you can connect with a provider. So that's the goal. These are the things we want. What are the barriers? Provider shortages. Is Polk County a provider shortage area? Yes. Population is growing, but we don't have enough primary care. We don't have enough behavioral health, which you'll hear more about and you've already heard about. And we don't have enough dental access. I'm not sure we'll ever have enough, but we don't have enough, particularly for those that are uninsured or underinsured. Transportation challenges. We know we have those. I don't need to expand upon that. Lack of insurance. Right now, just under 20% of Polk County adults are uninsured from the standpoint of health insurance. Just under 20%. That's a lot of people. Children tend to be less likely to be uninsured because most kids are eligible for Medicaid. And we'll talk a little bit, I'm sure you all have heard about the Polk Healthcare Plan and the Indigent Health Plan and the wisdom of the community to devote in that sales tax. So we're able in this community to fund a safety net that is incredibly helpful. Cultural differences we've already spoken about. We don't have enough providers that are culturally appropriate for the population. And then having dates and times available. I know at the health department we have people that don't come for follow-up because they've got 4 kids at the house and they've got to work, and if they take an hour off, they could get fired. That breaks my heart. All right, so let's talk about the social determinants of health. These are the things that make up that 40% outcome of our health outcomes. Again, education, access, and quality, and the support functions within our schools. And that's early learning, regular school, and advanced learning. That's also very important. Again, healthcare and quality. Our neighborhoods and built environments. I am so proud of what's going on in this county. When new developments are being built, they're putting in sidewalks, they're putting in lighting, and they're retrofitting older neighborhoods to make them more safe. But you need churches, you need social structure. Those are the things that are so important to populations to feel connected and make them more satisfied. Social and community context and economic stability. Economic stability, critically important. We need to have jobs. We need to have a living wage, not just a minimum wage. We need to be able to take time off if need be. We need to plan for retirement. Economic stability, being able to afford our houses, our apartments. So let's look at the population age spread. Mr. Beasley relayed that our population is now projected to be 787,000 people. In 2021, the census showed that about 24% of our population is under 19, 31% between 20 and 44, 24% between 45 and 64, and we have an aging population, or about 20% over 65. I would contend to you that each of these segments of age need a little bit different things within their age to make them successful. My heart goes to the young and the old. Our 0 to 19-year-olds, what do they need? They need family, they need love, they need a house, they need social support, they need health care, they need to have schools that are wraparound for them, not only for education, but to provide other support. What can go wrong in those young age groups? Adverse childhood experiences. Is their parent incarcerated? Does their parent use drugs? Are there drugs in the house? Has the child been abused mentally or physically? Those things impact them throughout life. So we have a lot of work going on with our youth on mental and behavioral health. On the other hand, that's when young people learn resiliency. How many times do you hear an interview on TV, a lot of times it's an athlete, that they were raised by their single mom and their mom worked hard and got them through. That person learned resiliency from their family and their communities. So a critical developmental time. Our middle ages is a time of working and living and supporting families and hopefully accumulating a little bit of wealth to tide them over when they get older. That's the ideal world. Doesn't happen when you're spending 40 or 50% of your income on housing. That's the goal. And then our over 65s, which the population is shifting in age, again, needs that social support. They need affordable housing. They need, healthy food. So again, there's just things that are needed throughout. So let's look at our population by race and ethnicity. This was in 2010, and this is our population in 2020. And we see that our Hispanic population is increasing, as is our Black population slightly. So what are we hearing? That there is increasing diversity of population within our county. Some of our demographics, and I hesitated to put the high school graduation rate of 78.3 because I know there were some nuances and issues that happened with the pandemic. Is it really closer to 80% or 78%? I don't know. It's better than it was 10 years ago. We got a little ways to go. 30% of our adults over 25 have an associate's degree or higher. We'd like that to be a little higher, but we know that trade schools and other opportunities are also important, but we can't lose sight that we really do have a goal of having an educated population. Our median household income in Polk County is $55,000. The state median income is about $62,000. In Polk, look at the discrepancy between a white and a Black household. White households make about $16,000 more annually than Black households. And currently about 30% of our population experiencing a high cost burden. So 30% of our families spend more than 30% of their income on housing. And that's worse for those who are renters than for those who are homeowners. So how long do we live in Polk County? Our overall average life expectancy in Polk is 77.4 years, which is a little less than overall for Florida. There is some discrepancy based on race and ethnicity. Our Hispanic population tends to live a little longer than whites and longer than Blacks, and our females tend to live longer than males. What do we die from? Our leading cause of death in Polk County is heart disease. Number 2 is cancer. Number 3 are injuries. Number 4 is stroke. Okay? Now you'll notice that the top 2 are chronic diseases, so keep that in the back of your mind as we go further. So we're going to talk a little bit about the continuum of age and what impacts the health of different ages. Our infants, 61, almost 62% of infants born to moms in Polk County, which we had last year about 8,500 births, only 62% had adequate prenatal care. What does that mean? Close to 40% did not have adequate prenatal care. And adequate means that they got their first visit early enough in the pregnancy and that they had the recommended number of visits. And the advantage of these visits is that the providers can pick up on things like maternal obesity, hypertension, substance use, and other chronic conditions that impact not only the mom but the newborn. Infant mortality. In 2021, we had 63 infant deaths, which is a rate of 7.4 deaths per 1,000, which is significantly higher than the state. And our Black infant mortality varies from year to year, but it is always significantly higher than white infant mortality. Last year, our Black infants were 3 times more likely to die before their first birthday. So what scares us about our infant deaths is sleep-related deaths. If you remember nothing else today, remember my plea about safe sleep for our newborns and kids up to the age of 1. Sleep-related suffocation is the leading cause of preventable infant deaths in Polk County. What does sleep-related suffocation mean? That means that perhaps the baby was co-slept with the parents, and a parent could roll over on a baby. If you want to know a tragedy that will destroy a parent is having them realize that they may have inadvertently led to that child's death. It is putting a child in a sleep position. Some of the either pre-made or purchased things at the baby's head, that was loud, baby's head is scrunched over and they block their airway, or if there are loose and soft things in their crib. So the rules of safe sleep are the ABCs. The baby should be alone, on their back, in a crib. Alone, on their back, in a crib. Nothing soft and fluffy and cute in the crib. Put them in a cute onesie if you want cute. Alone on their back in the crib. You can put the crib or the bassinet in the parent's room, but let's have them in a separate sleep environment, and let's not let them get too hot, because that's the latest thing. If our babies are overheated, they have a greater risk of SUIDs. Children, young children, the leading cause of unintentional injury for children ages 1 to 4 is drowning. I lied. I told you there was one thing I wanted you to remember, which was safe sleep. The second thing is drowning. 1 to 4, that's the leading cause of unintentional injury. I'll put out another slide on that in just a minute. When we talked about social support for our children, we currently have over 1,200 kids in foster care, which is significantly higher than the state rate. We have 755.9 per 100,000 population, significantly higher. Thank goodness for foster care, but it's sad as to what's happening in that child's home life that they needed to go to foster care. And about 18% of our families with children under 18 live below the poverty level. This is poverty level. This is not living wage level. So this is a complex slide, but I just want to bring something to your attention. So there were 35 child fatalities in 2022. These were not all child fatalities. These were ones that were reported for possibly being related to abuse and neglect. Of those 35 childhood demises, 80% were under the age of 3, and 14 of them were sleep-related. So if you say, does sleep-related deaths occur in Polk County? The answer is absolutely yes. I want to see that at 0. And 3 of them were drowning-related. So let's talk about drowning. Florida has the 3rd highest rate of drowning deaths in the nation. Yesterday, somebody said, well, what are the top 2 states? And believe it or not, it's Alaska and Hawaii. They probably have a little bit more water than we do. But we're the 3rd highest rate of drowning in the nation, and Polk is the 10th highest for drowning deaths in the state. Again, varies from year to year. A few years ago, we were number 4, so it does vary, but we've got a lot of drowning deaths. During 2022, Polk County Fire Rescue responded to 25 drowning-related calls. Of those 25 calls, 14 led to death. Of the 25, 22 were in a pool, 3 in a bathtub. Interesting to me, it wasn't lakes and whatever. Of the 22, they were ages 0 to 10, and 3 were ages 54 and plus. Most calls occurred during the month of April, and the highest risk area was Davenport. Why do you think we have more drowning deaths in Davenport? Spring break. It's rentals, people coming from out of state or out of country, staying in a house, renting a house that has a pool. They've never dealt with a pool before. So they're having a good time, they're enjoying themselves, and the child sneaks out of the door. So there's a lot of work we need to do for people that rent short-term housing, Airbnbs or whatever. We don't want any kids to die of drowning, or adults for that matter. All right, so let's move up to the adolescent area. In 2021, there were 83 hospitalizations for non-fatal self-harm. So these were suicide attempts. There were 91 suicides in Polk County in 2021. None of them were adolescents, but there were 7 between the ages, I believe, of 22 and 26. So fortunately, no adolescents, but again, I don't want those 91 suicides. How can we connect these people to mental health resources? Substance use for adolescents and next age up is of concern. 13.7% of students report drinking alcohol. So what are the substances I want to talk about? Alcohol, opioids, including fentanyl, marijuana, methamphetamine, the stuff we hear about. Do you know that adults that use substances, the vast majority started substance use in their teen years? So we're really working hard to communicate with our middle and high school students, don't use substances. Be smart, but there's a lot of peer pressure. You can buy a vape pen, but you don't know what's in that vape pen. The substance that strikes terror in my heart is fentanyl. Fentanyl is out there. Do we have it in Polk County? Yes. We don't have as much as we could because of a wonderful law enforcement. But there's two main types of fentanyl. There's fentanyl that's pharmaceutical grade that is actually prescribed to cancer patients by a licensed provider. Then you've got fentanyl that comes through the black market. It may have been made in China and come in through Mexico. There's just all sorts of stories. But fentanyl is extremely deadly. Powdered fentanyl that's the weight of a mosquito can kill an adult. 2 milligrams. Now, if you think about it, a typical Tylenol extra strength pill is 650 milligrams. Well, let's pretend it's 500 because it's easy to do the math. 500 milligram Tylenol tablet has enough quantity, if it was fentanyl, to kill 250 people. So it's huge, and it can be found, and it doesn't take a lot to kill somebody. And if it's illicitly put in a substance that they think is just a vape pen, it could kill them. So we now have Narcan all over the place. DCS has it, the health department has it, law enforcement has it. If anybody wants Narcan, no questions asked, come to the health department. The only question we will ask is, are you at least 18? We don't want to know why you want it. We don't want to know who it's for. But get the word out. We've got Narcan in all of our clinic sites, which is nasal. It's easy to administer, and we're happy to give the education for that. And then obesity is an issue in our middle and high schools. I'm sorry, I'm going to try to speed up. Young adults, I'm concerned about our STD and HIV rates. Polk County is in the 4th quartile, which is the worst for HIV diagnoses and bacterial STDs, significantly higher among Black population. We've already spoken of substance use. Again, adolescents and young adults are a concern. In 2021, we had nearly 300 deaths from substances, and of those, about half were opioids. Just confirms what we already know. Bike ped safety, very, very important. We know there are a number of pedestrian bicyclist deaths. There's a bike ped committee for Polk Vision, and this obviously is a dangerous area, and a lot of work is being done to make our community safer, and all of us as drivers should be aware of the walkers. I live on Lake Morton, and every day when I go home, I got to watch out for people crossing and bike riding. Our issues with adults, overweight and obesity. 71% of our adults are overweight or obese. This unfortunately accentuates chronic diseases like heart disease, stroke, and diabetes. Remember, I spoke about the 2 leading causes of death, which are heart disease and cancer, both of which are more common in people who are overweight or obese, and our health behaviors. Smoking, being sedentary, not getting enough sleep, not taking care of ourselves. Our older adults struggle, some struggle with social isolation. Perhaps their child, their children, their grandkids live out of state, so they don't have a social network. There's housing cost burden for older adults. Perhaps they had not had the opportunity to plan well, and they're living on Social Security, and they can't find an economical place to live. And then falls. Our leading cause of injury, fatality, deaths in our older people are falls. So what are our top health priorities? We just went through a whole bunch of stuff, but you all are probably, most of you are aware, we went through a community health assessment several years ago, and the 3 leading health priorities for the county: behavioral health and substance abuse, access to healthcare services, exercise, nutrition, and weight. So the behavioral health priority, Polk Vision has a behavioral health team was formed to address this issue. This led to, about 2 years ago, a countywide assessment and gaps analysis, which has led to a strategic plan, and then dividing of this group up into subcommittees to look at buckets of things so we can make a difference. We can talk all day, and it's important to know these things, but unless we can take action to work on these things, we're going to be still talking about the same things in 10 years. We know that our issues are youth. Starting with early learning, we've got to get to those families that support those kids, our school age, our college age youth. We really need to get to them. We need to engage our high-risk groups with behavioral health providers. We know Mr. Beasley mentioned the indigent health plan and dollars going to our behavioral health providers and substance use providers. We got to link people to care, and we have to let people know where to go and how to get resources and break down silos among our behavioral health stakeholders and our physical health stakeholders and our businesses and our government, and really have the conversations to move the needle. Access to healthcare services, I've already spoken about the fact that we are a health provider shortage area. Those are the ratios. We're significantly lower than the state, which is worse than the nation. We have a very robust healthcare safety net in Polk. Is it enough? No. But we're fortunate to have the Polk Healthcare Plan and the Indigent Healthcare Plan, which helps fund safety net providers. We've got, our free clinics, Lakeland Regional Health, FQHC, the County Health Department and mental health providers are all working like this, walking around to try to catch people that don't have funding or don't know where to go. Other activities to support the community, including we did a very large, unexpectedly large community baby shower at RP Funding a few weeks ago. We thought we would have 200 people, and over 1,000 women and families showed up. But it was great. We got to teach them about safe sleep. We got to give them pool monitors. We got to give them things, but it shows the need, and we need to continue with those things. The county has a mobile health bus, which moves around. Obviously, it's a bus, so it does move, but it goes to places of underserved areas, and the health department has a nurse on that bus that helps with screenings and helps to convince people they need to get care. We're fortunate there's now getting to be a series of navigators across the county with United Way, Peace River Center, and other entities that try to connect people to care. And then lastly, I want to talk about exercise, nutrition, and weight priority. It's not just Polk County, but we've got a Food Security Council on one hand. We have overweight and obesity. We have other areas of the community that are food deserts. So there are a number of feeding projects, and then I'm pleased that the health department was instrumental in getting a community garden up and going in Lake Wales with an opening a couple of weeks ago, and that is in a community that is underserved, and I know KidPAC is an important partner with that. We're partnering with pediatric offices to educate on physical activity and nutrition. Obviously, from exercise, we talk about water safety and pedestrian and bicycle safety initiative. So in conclusion, what is the health status of the Polk? Yesterday I said, some things are good. Some things we have room for improvement. We'll never be perfect. But we're fortunate that we have the collaboration, and I think we're aligning goals across the county with people that can move and shake things. On the other hand, we need people, myself included, to be more responsible for own behaviors. We need to not use substances. We need to get enough sleep. We need to avoid things like fentanyl and opioids. We need positive outlooks. We need to turn the TV news off, and let's enjoy life. I think there's opportunities, but we're on the right track. And I'm very pleased to be part of the public health arena in Polk County. Thank you.
Ooh, all right. I know we're running a little long, but we're going to do some rapid fire Q&A. So hold tight for us. Okay. I was told, please be brief and only soundbite answers. Thank you. All right, incredible amount of information today. Thank you all for being here. Question number 1. This is for our friends from Polk County, Commissioner Lindsey, or County Manager Bill Beasley. Within the room, there are leaders from across the county. How can we support the county in the growth management they are having to undertake?
Well, we have a pretty good rapport between the respective planning staffs between the cities and the county. They meet regularly and they compare notes, so I would encourage that continued relationship. Each city and county has its own goals and their standards, and nobody's asking them to compromise that, but where we have common interests, then we need to start keeping the dialogue open. And I think the PRWC is a great example of that collaboration. And there will be other opportunities for collaboration on how we handle some of the traffic problems that we're facing on a countywide basis. So keep the lines of communication open.
Let me just say a couple of quick things along Commissioner Lindsey's line. Our municipal partners, don't lose sight of the annexation issues going on in Polk County today. Annexation is clearly a way for municipalities to grow. I think in terms of where those areas are annexed, when they're annexed, how they're annexed, the infrastructure associated with supporting the annexation, all of that is part of that unified philosophy about through our growth responsibility ends, whose responsibility starts, the costs associated with that infrastructure. So annexation is certainly a vital tool in our bag, but I think annexation has to be something that we're careful about and judicious about how we do that. The other thing I would also say is that Commissioner Lindsey alluded to the idea of kind of a common growth pattern, comprehensive plans, land development codes, those kind of things, and any types of common threads across jurisdictions certainly makes sense, and I think we do a pretty good job of that in working with our municipal partners. But I come back to annexation. We need to be smart about annexation in this county.
Thank you. Question number 2, Polk County Public Schools, this is for you. If there is one thing that we need to advocate for the last days in session, what would it be?
Do we each get one?
You can.
I would say one of the things that I'm most concerned about, and it's moved through the House, it's now getting ready to head to the Senate floor, is school start times. It is worrisome in that it will essentially affect how we do everything in Polk County. We travel 2.5 times around the entire circumference of the globe every day. So currently school start times are 7 a.m. for high schools, 8 a.m. for elementary, 9 a.m. for middle. This bill would make it where we could not start middle school until 8 a.m. and high school until 8:30 a.m., which would essentially mean we would have to change our start times to elementary starting at 7 a.m., middle school starting at 8 a.m., and high school starting at 9 a.m., which for those employers, that means high schoolers would not get out of school until after 4 p.m., which means they could not start after-school jobs until after 5 p.m. It also would put elementary school students at bus stops at 6 a.m. And getting out of school at 2 p.m. So if you have any moms that work for you that leave at 3 to pick up their kids, they would now have to leave at 2. So that would go into effect in 2026. But I'm very concerned about the implications that will have if it continues to move through.
And that was another question we had, so thank you for answering.
Oh,
2 in 1.
I'd continue to advocate for further revision to the FEFP funding mechanism. I think we have to go back to square one, similar to how we approached our community. What is it we value in public education? What is it we want to accomplish? And then how do we adequately fund that? The current model for school funding has, until very recently, until this legislative session, hasn't been modified in over 50 years. And to think about how far we've come and to think about all of the additional services and requirements that we have really piled on top of public education, all the social services we now have to provide and everything else, just to get students to be ready for learning, takes up a considerable amount of resources and funding. So I would continue to advocate for a revision in our funding mechanism.
And we're lucky in Polk County that we have the chairwoman of the appropriations.
Yes.
Chair Tomko, just in case anyone would like to know. Next question, Commissioner Lindsey. What effect will getting water via deep well, then treating and pumping it have on our water bill?
It will go up. There is no more cheap water. That's what it boils down to. And remember, each municipality, the utility operation is an enterprise fund. And we often say government should be run like a business. Well, that means you can't sell the product for less than it costs to produce it. Different cities will have different impacts as they keep their rates current. Those that have a lot of capacity of old water and a little bit of need for new water, their blended average will be less. Those cities that have a little bit of old water, and I think every representative on the PRWC understands they have to monitor their rates more frequently than they have in the past and keep them current with current costs, current regulations, current DEP and public health safety standards, and operate that enterprise as it should be. But it ain't going down. It's simply going to cost more. And as I said in the recent article in the paper, somebody made decisions and capital contributions 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago that allowed us to be where we are today. So now it's our obligation to continue that responsible investment going forward.
Thank you. Dr. Jackson, I know you talked about it a little bit before, but what are some of the other factors that contribute to high infant mortality for minorities?
We see a tendency toward not getting early prenatal care. I believe there are some issues sometimes with finding the provider that they can connect with and for that woman to advocate for herself. So I think that this is really a social determinants question and things that we need to work on with communities. And I really want to frame it in what does it take to have a successful, safe, and healthy pregnancy. And it really starts with planned pregnancies, having social support and adequate housing before you get pregnant. And it's really about planning and then finding the right provider and provider network to make a safe environment for that baby. So anyway.
Thank you for that. Let's see, next, back to the Board of County Commission. With respect to workforce housing, what can be done to accelerate that growth as well?
Get far enough down into that workforce and affordable housing area. The chart that Mr. Beasley shared earlier about the various source of funds, sale and ship and years ago, a teeny tiny bit of your doc stamps, whether it's a mortgage, a note, a payoff, recording an easement, whatever, you pay doc stamps on residential, commercial, industrial. A little piece of that was dedicated to affordable housing. Unfortunately, over time, those funds were swept by the legislature and spent in other fashions. In recent years, they've made a commitment, yes, we will stop sweeping it, but they cut the rate in half. So it's still half is better than nothing, but those unfettered dollars could go a very, very long way. But it's going to take that kind of commitment to make a positive impact. The site that was the funds have been reserved to set aside for one additional. We've got to get out of this mindset that I don't want those kind of people in my neighborhood. You've heard it, you've seen it, you witnessed it. There has to be the mosaic of all people in all neighborhoods. And sometimes those impediments deter a variety of housing.
Let me just add that the programs that we do have, don't lose sight that some of the recipients of those funds are workforce, and they're part of our workforce, whether it be rental assistance, mortgage assistance, utility assistance, whether it be home renovations. Those are still people who are, in some cases, in the workforce. So don't mischaracterize our affordable housing initiative that it's not touching the workforce elements. It does touch some of our workforce elements. Now, we don't have housing programs per se identified for workforce housing, but some of the housing stock that we do touch is workforce housing.
Thank you. Dr. Jackson, next to you. This question is near and dear to my heart, but I did not send it in, so I want you to know that. What is the state of the public health workforce? Do we have enough staff?
No. You mean expand?
question.
Yep, there you go. Easy enough. All right, final question. I know Superintendent Heid, you touched on this briefly, but when do you anticipate school redistricting to begin?
No.
Okay. Thank you for being here.
That is
Oh,
definitely a yes.
Sorry, so high schools, the attendance boundary committee has been working on high school boundaries almost this entire school year. They'll bring anywhere from probably 5 models to an upcoming school board member or school board meeting. The board will provide feedback. They'll review it. They'll provide some opportunities for revision, or they'll express concerns as they have done previously, and that's the whole beauty of the process. And then we will take them out into the community to hold community meetings. So high schools, you can expect to see information probably no later than June, July. It would not impact the upcoming school year. We're always planning a year out. And again, I want to put everybody at ease. Unlike what our neighboring counties have done, I will not be recommending to the board a forced move. It will always will allow students to be grandfathered into their current school, and then you can complete until you finish that school, and then you'll have to go to your next zone school or apply to a magnet or academy. So there's a lot of flexibility there for families. We don't want to disrupt current relationships on our campuses. Then you'll see middle schools probably about mid-year, so that we can get high schools and middle schools probably launched simultaneously, and then we'll do elementary schools a year later. Elementary schools will probably be the most disruptive, and part of that is the district has to take greater ownership in realizing why some schools have declined in their enrollment, and it's typically been a lack of performance or adequate performance academically, or lack of adequate programs. So that's why we've been trying to replicate more programs across the school district, those high interest, high rigor programs, to reassure families that they'll have choices, and most importantly within their zip code. And we're trying to move away from students having to move all the way across the district to get access to a program. And so we're replicating those as quickly as we can. So it's a complicated response, but high schools will come out first, then you'll see middle schools almost very quickly on the heels of that, and then you'll see elementary schools. We really want almost a year for discussion publicly about elementary schools, because that's where over 50% of our enrollment is. So.
Thank you. Well, I've been handed a couple more questions, so you're not off the hot seat yet. Here we go. Back to Polk County Public Schools. Our transportation costs, our transportation cost more than other districts given our district's very large geographic area?
So that's a good question as far as if we spend more. I know how many miles we drive a day. It's basically the circumference of our globe. I'd have to look into that. I'm not sure. It's because I'd have to analyze it the correct way, based off how many miles per trip are we driving. I know that we don't get reimbursed fully, and there are some options that we're exploring for schools that are overcrowded and have a lot of traffic congestion. So Chain of Lakes, Lakeland Highlands Middle, there's a few where we could actually, because we're only at about 60% capacity on those buses, we could actually bus students less than 2 miles. We could reduce that to a mile. The problem is right now, if we were to do that, we're actually penalized by the state, because there's an efficiency component to our reimbursement that if we add more students to the bus that don't qualify for transportation, it reduces our efficiency rating and we actually lose funding. So we'll be working with the legislators this upcoming school year to eliminate that penalty. But I'd have to get you an answer. I don't know that answer.
Thank you. Thank you to whoever texted that one in, too. Appreciate it. Back to the Board of County Commission. This is a long one, so be prepared. It was mentioned earlier that the county will be looking at its current paradigm for its delivery of services, moving from a rural mindset to a more urbanized way of delivering services. As the county looks to further develop its delivery of behavioral health services, are there early processes or plans that can be shared?
Holy cow,
Yeah, that's a big one.
it's a long one.
Well, let me just, on the behavioral health side, the main focus of that comment about being very much of becoming an urbanized county as opposed to a lot of rural philosophy it's the more obvious things that you see. There's an expectation that our parks are used more frequently, so they're cleaned more frequently. There's an expectation that litter is picked up on the roadsides more frequently. There's an expectation that roadside grass mowing is done on a more frequent basis. Those are more urban levels of service. On the behavioral health side, I mean, I've never distinguished urban and rural from behavioral health. I mean, if you've got a behavioral health issue, I don't care whether you live in the urban parts of the county or the rural parts of the county. I think I made a statement earlier, the county annual budget has increased regularly, and I anticipate it will continue to increase to address behavioral health in a very broad umbrella, whether it be mental health, opioids, substance abuse, developmental disabilities. So I think the county is committed, the county is all in. Whether it's an urban philosophy or a rural philosophy, Dr. Jackson had alluded to it, there's really capacity challenges about service providers to provide those services. That's where our real focus is going to be, regardless of where you live. Now, she didn't allude to, if you live in the real rural portion of the county, you may be challenged to get access to caregivers. That potentially addresses county transit issues, transportation issues, rail issues, a whole slew of things. But the county's all in, regardless of whether you're considered in an urban or a rural environment.
Good, okay. Back to Polk County Public Schools. The people have questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Are students advanced to the next grade even if they do not perform at grade level?
Yes, some students can actually move to the next grade level. At every grade level, we have retention criteria. And the state has mandated retention criteria in grades 3, 8, and then obviously again in high school prior to graduation. And they either have to pass and be able to demonstrate reading proficiency in particular, that they're on grade level, or through concordance score. And so concordance score means that a student as an alternative can take the SAT or ACT based off their reported score. They can actually meet graduation requirements, which is an interesting argument, right? How is it a student can't pass the statewide reading assessment and yet they can reach a concordance score in the SAT and ACT, which are basically precursors to college readiness and college enrollment. So it's kind of an interesting conversation. Right now, there's actually a third test that's being discussed. It's a test that's largely used by our charter schools and private schools. And so if that may become a third option for our students, and we'll find out by the end of session. But students who demonstrate more than a year's worth of growth can be promoted to the next grade level, so long as there's a plan put in place to help remediate that student to catch them up to grade level.
Perfect, yes.
Can I back up to the earlier question about
Yes, sir, of course.
access from the rural county? A couple years ago, the county did operate a transportation disadvantage program for a variety of grants and plus local match. And the county also operated a Winter Haven area transit operation. And then we decided to merge with the Lakeland Area Mass Transit District, LAMTAD, which I serve on that board. Commissioner Santiago serves on that board, Mayor Mutt serves on it. And that merger was really an example of local government working together for the most advantageous benefit of our citizens. So effectively, the county contracted with Lakeland Area Mass Transit to provide this service that resulted in tremendous savings in overhead, consolidating employee tasks. So those people who are transportation disadvantaged can call for door-to-door service for certain medical appointments, et cetera. So there is a path to that, but most often, as we've heard all day long, is there is a lack of communication of people knowing where to go to get local services, and Dr. Jackson made reference to it earlier that there needs to be more coordination between the agencies to avoid duplication and avoid people falling between the cracks. But there are paths through the Transportation Disadvantage Program to meet that need.
Perfect, thank you. Our last question goes to, how do we know when the pandemic ends?
Well, we're out of the pandemic, but we're in an endemic phase. So COVID is still around. There's new variants. There's a new one now. Fortunately, it does not seem to be a worse actor than others. Vaccines are obviously still available. So I think in my opinion, I think that we're going to see COVID sort of turn into the modern day flu. From this standpoint will likely be recommendations for vaccines, and I don't know what frequency. So yes, it's still out there. If people get sick, yes, please be tested. Stay home if you're sick. Take care, but we're seeing fewer hospitalizations and fewer deaths than we are now. But it certainly is affecting workforce and I'm sure schools with people that are out with sickness. So welcome to endemicity.
Thank you. All right, that's our last question. Can we have a nice round of applause for our panelists today? We all know it's not easy being a public servant, so we appreciate your service. It's sometimes more than likely probably a thankless job, so thank you. We appreciate you. So our time together coming to an end. Thank you for sticking it out. I know we ran a little bit long, but we hope that you found the presentations informative and valuable. So just to let you know that our next event on our Leadership Exchange Series is the Mayor's Roundtable, which will be taking place right here in the Center for Public Safety at 8 a.m. There's no date, but we'll let you know that. On behalf of Polk Vision and the Government Advisory Team, we want to thank you again for being here. Thank you for our event sponsors, Avon Health, Citizens Bank and Trust, and TICO. Thank you to Dr. Falconetti and the Polk State College Center of Public Safety. Thank you to Commissioner Lindsey, County Manager Bill Beasley, Chair Sara Beth Wyatt, Superintendent Heid, and Dr. Joy Jackson for being here, and your staff members that got you here. So thank you, appreciate that. Big thank you to the PGTV staff who provided audio and live streamed today's program. A special thanks to our dear friends at Polk Vision, Ashley Surgeon, Tara Watson, and Kim Long. And to all of you, thank you for sharing the vision. Safe travels, and we'll see you next time.